Okay, well, the Socialist Collective podcast. Essentially what we're going to be doing here is going over theory. We want to teach theory and bring theory to the masses, essentially. As communists, we think this is very important for communists to do, because a lot of the YouTube space is being taken up by the right wing currently, so we want to actually put ourselves out there and try and combat this, because we don't want the right wing to just be taking up all this space. So we're also going over topical news stories of the day also, but also to promote this Discord you see on the right hand side here, which is called the Socialist Patients Collective, right, which is also the name of the podcast. Marte, do you want to talk a little bit about the Discord, why you created it?
Yeah, the Socialist Patients Collective Discord server is named after a German collective of socialist mental health patients. They were a very radical group. They actually did some armed struggle, and they basically wanted to formulate an analysis of mental illness under capitalism, and they wrote a polemic / manifesto called "Turn Illness into a Weapon," which was kind of a revolutionary treatise on that relationship between capitalism and mental illness, where they basically concluded that capitalism, in a way, creates the condition of illness in all the people that are forced to live in the system. And they even argued that it's not just the mental health patients that are ill, or mentally ill, to be specific, but it's actually all of society that are ill under capitalism. And this is because of the contradiction between life needs and the need to produce, like these essential parts of being a human being, and capital. And so their argument was essentially that this condition of social illness that exists is a negative in a way, but at the same time, and this is their dialectical materialist way of assessing the situation, it has a revolutionary kernel in it, mental illness. And that's because the conditions under capitalism makes life so difficult for people, causes illness in people, and that illness cannot go away unless capitalism is destroyed. So that means that mental illness, the depression and the anxiety that people feel living in capitalist society, can also be revolutionary because it can produce the desire to fight for change.
Yeah.
Sorry,
go on. I didn't want to talk over you.
I was just gonna. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. The whole idea was that we need to turn illness into a weapon, so to speak, which is access that revolutionary kernel of the general mental illness that affects us all in capitalist society, and channel that towards social revolution and a future of communism.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And I don't want to go too far off the track here, but we are coming off the heels of the Zizek-Peterson debate last night, which was essentially about, the topic apparently was capitalism, communism, and happiness. And I feel like sort of the mental health aspect of people living under capitalism was very much sort of not mentioned in that debate at all. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfortunate because Zizek is a psychoanalyst and a Marxist, and so he is actually one of those people, much like the Socialist Patients Collective, actually does think about the connection between or the effect of capitalism on the psyches of the people that exist in capitalist society. So, I mean, it could have went there, I guess, but it didn't.
Yeah.
And of course, like, Jordan Peterson is also a psychologist, I guess.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they both have sort of
That kind of
academia
background
in the field. Yeah, so I don't know why it didn't quite go there. I don't know. That's one of those things, I guess. So, what we're going to be looking at today, as you can probably see because it's been on screen, is going to be this article that was released by the Communist Party of Great Britain, ML, as a fellow countryman. I'm sorry, and it's called the Reactionary Nightmare of Gender Fluidity here. So, what I wanted to do is go through this and talk about why this is essentially incorrect. And we're all just going to chime in at certain points at any point that we feel like we have something to say, essentially. So I'm just going to go through it and read it, and then we can talk about it sort of paragraph by paragraph or section by section.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, awesome. So why are we having this debate? I would like to say that I agree with motion 8. It's quite clear that this is an issue which causing genuine confusion, and not only in our party. Our party is the reflection of society, and if it's confusing to us, you can bet that there's far greater confusion elsewhere. While I'm sympathetic with the argument put down by motion A, okay, so this is just talking about, sort of the identity politics arguments that they're having internally within the party, and then they're saying that everyone else must be equally as confused just because they are, right? And the reference...
Can I just chime in really? It's Also, I'm just in the Discord. I don't.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah. This is Justin. Yeah, so that's a great point. Actually, we should have mentioned this. That what we're going to do is also have what was going to be a third section, but we're going to bring people in from the Discord just to sort of converse on these topics with us. And I think we're just going to bring other people in each episode, right? So this way we get sort of an interactive basis on the Discord, and people feel like they're a part of it, and it's a collective thing, and there's some sort of interaction there between people, which is should be something that's fostered in these spaces, right?
Yeah. And just as for me personally, I just identify as a left-wing nationalist. Yeah. But in regards to what they're talking about, where they see themselves as a reflection of society, I think it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah,
just not to psycho. I'm not a psychoanalyst or I don't have a doctorate in psychology. Or anything. But I think it's just interesting. Whenever any group likes to make that claim, not that they're a reflection of a certain cultural current in society, but that's just that their party reflects the feeling of society generally.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to me that the CPGB-ML, that specific communist party, is a reflection of all of British society.
Well, I think it's problematic once we get way deeper in the article and they start talking about their particular opinions about gender fluidity and gender identity generally. I feel like it's just their conception of where Britain is at socially, to me, is very... And maybe because you live in Great Britain, you have more insight into that. But I think that... I don't know how reactionary Great Britain is generally, but the opinions that they express...
yeah, I doubt those are the
I hope they're not.
Opinions.
I hope that's not...
No. Yeah, it's strange that they would even speak for the entirety of sort of the left community, right? Because I think there are 20 socialist and communist parties in the United Kingdom, right? And I think CPGB-ML are certainly among one of the largest, I think. They're certainly not small by any measure. They do have, mainstream politicians that speak about them and mention them and everything, and they put on annual marches and things, so they're not nobodies, but they certainly don't represent sort of all of mainstream left-wing thought in the country.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous claim to make, to be honest. It's completely ridiculous.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that themselves
as the center of the world, so to speak.
Not the center of the world, just they view themselves as reflective of
British society as a whole.
And maybe specifically proletarian British society.
Yeah. But honestly, they didn't even say that. They just said it's a reflection of society in general. It's pretty bad. But,
Yeah, sure. I'll continue on. It says here, while I'm sympathetic with the arguments put forward by those opposed to Motion 8, so here they're sort of giving, the due to those who oppose them here, essentially. They say we clearly do need to have a debate, and clearly some people have taken on identity politics as a central part of political discourse. And then they do the whole people in our schools, society, and every mainstream paper you turn to thing. So this, I don't want to say this is a right-wing idea, but it does seem to be like they're almost using that right-wing idea of like the whole of society is identity politics, even people in our schools to our, every mainstream paper, which is I don't know if it's pretty strange thing. It says, a mere reference to gender identity and IDPOL without expressing an opinion is enough to make many people incandescent with rage. We have to ask ourselves why, just because I grew up years ago. So here he's just going to talk about like his own personal life here. People didn't talk about it and didn't debate it in the 70s and 80s. So Marx, Engels, Lenin and Stalin didn't devote much attention to the politics of gender fluidity because it did not exist as an issue.
Okay, oh wait. I guess you haven't finished the...
Yeah.
No, it's okay. You can hop in at any time. Like, anytime you have anything to say, just jump in and, yeah.
Literally the term, identity politics was coined in the 70s. Like, it definitely was talked about in the 70s and 80s. That's a lie. Like, that's not true. Yeah. I guess you could argue that it wasn't mainstream discourse, but then, if you even take, identity politics as, a broader, category of a type of politics relating to people's identities, people organizing around being black, people organizing around being trans, etc., etc. Those organizations did exist. That was part of political discourse in the time period that he talked about.
Yeah.
It's not true that this is a new thing.
Yeah, they even go on to say that contrary to the opinion of those opposed, it's not as old as humanity.
I talked about this before we started recording, because it's a really wild thing to think that.
Yeah.
Because what he's talking about in the 70s and the 80s, he's talking about people who were involved in American academia who codified the difference between sex and gender.
Yeah.
And he talks about this more later on, but just this idea that he thinks before gender and sex were codified as two different things, they didn't exist as two different things. And to me at least, I feel like that is missing the point of the dichotomy, because the point is that it has always existed. There's always been a divide between material sex and social gender.
Exactly.
And how your material sex doesn't necessarily inform what your role is in terms of the gender dichotomy that exists in gender binary societies. But and he says it isn't as old as humanity, but you can look at the course of human history in a lot of humans. I'm not going to say all of them authoritatively about that because I'm not an expert, but at least in my personal reading, you see this divide in ancient Greek society. They had a concept of sex versus gender. In Native American societies, they had a concept of sex versus gender. So I think he's wrong to say that it didn't exist before the 70s and 80s. But the way he's framing it it gets to his point. His ultimate point is that it's a dumb thing to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think you get that from the title, Reactionary, not Urgency. And I think it's a broader issue in certain, I'm going to even call them reactionary currents inside of leftism, which view identity and politics revolving around identity as hurdles to achieving important political goals. And we can talk about that later, because he talks about that later. But I feel like it's just important for understanding where he's coming from, is he doesn't see identity politics, IDPOL as a whole, as this monolith is a discussion. He doesn't see that as an important discussion topic. He sees it as a hurdle which the Communist Party Great Britain, Marxist-Leninism,
must overcome. Yeah,
must overcome in order to its other goals.
Exactly.
Not something which can help them achieve their other goals.
Exactly.
Yeah. They even go on later to say that they think it's more sinister than just something that should be overcome when they talk about where they think it comes from. We'll get to it, but they certainly have a theory of where this started and where it come from. But they go on to ask the question, does material reality exist? They say, I do think that it's very important that all our discussions are rooted in material reality, which communists should agree with, right? So this is, this is basic, essentially.
That's orthodox.
Yeah. Do we think a material reality exists? Sure, because there is a fundamental question of philosophy which underlines everything. Sure, absolutely. It's why dialectics are so powerful. I don't want to go on about it. It wasn't me that invented dialectics, just in case you weren't sure. I have a firm adherence of it and the revolutionary teachings of Marx, sure. It didn't come naturally to me. Now she is going to go on to talk about her parents here through struggling with ideas and understanding. Grew up in bourgeois society like everyone else. Talks about her reverence for science, which is all good. Studying history and politics, I argued my school teachers are sent me out of class for disagreeing. I mean, that's fairly typical among leftists, right? You have to have this sort of rebel strain. I mean, especially when you come up against sort of bourgeois ideas or bourgeois philosophy, then you have this thing inside you that just wants to fight against that. That makes sense, sure. The thing they say here is that Lenin quite rightly told us that if geometrical axioms affect human interests, attempts would certainly be made to refute them. And I don't quite know what to make of this, because the context in which Lenin used this quote certainly wasn't related to gender, I don't think. I mean, they've even linked obviously told us here it's hyphenated, and then when you click it, it goes to the letter talking about Marxism and revisionism here, essentially. But yeah, I just don't think the idea that sort of geometrical axioms affected human interest. I probably agree with that. Like, I think attempts would be made to refute them. But that doesn't.
But again, like, that's not really relevant to.
Yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're like by definition a bad thing, right?
Exactly.
So they go on to say, what did he mean? There are simple formulas that tell one the volume of a sphere, or how to work out the area of a triangle, half times the base times the height. Does anyone fundamentally disagree with that? If a circle thinks it's a square, is it a square? What a stupid thing to say. No one's saying that. Okay.
Yeah, this next paragraph that he's about to read
Yeah.
is the moment where I got in the article where it was kind of the turning point.
Yeah, it's when it starts going downhill.
If you want to read this article, React structure.
Yeah.
This is the end of the introduction to the story.
Oh man. Yeah.
This is the inciting incident.
Exactly.
I'll let you read the next paragraph.
Yeah, let me just read these like two little bits and then we can go off. Are you ready? Why can't a circle self-identify as a square? Is there not some kind of shape fluidity between circles and squares? Are they not fundamentally the same? They all fundamentally consist of area. Why do we differentiate between them at all? Why has humanity worried to define objects as green or blue? Is there a material reality? There are those who will argue that there is no material reality, and we are not among them, because that is not a Marxist concept.
Okay.
Oh my god.
To first analyze just what they're saying, strictly speaking, yes, they're correct. A circle can't self-identify as a square.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the reasoning that they're using that they're implying, and what they later on go to do explicitly, is to try to extrapolate this type of thinking to human sex.
Right.
Yes.
And
And
they
gender.
equate, and the way that they're able to do this, and the reason why it's so toxic, is because they equate this type of thinking to how sex and gender work, and they think that sex and gender are the same thing. So
Exactly.
if someone is materially expressing female, just because, like, if they have breast and a vagina as opposed to, like, not having breast and having a penis, that means they must act a certain way as a result of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that means that is how they find themselves. It's very easy to say that a circle can't self-identify as a square because a circle isn't, like, an independent actor capable of independent thought. Like
Exactly. It's not
So,
like
like, yeah,
human
no
at
shit.
all. Exactly.
But that's not how, like, human beings don't. They're not circles or squares. They don't consist of area.
Yeah.
Where you can't. I think that it's an attempt to simplify the human. Later on, they go on to use this thinking and apply it to, like, how humans work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you try to do that, when you try to simplify the human experience into circles and squares, you miss a lot of the point of Marxist analysis.
Exactly.
The point of Marxist, and this is a critique of Marx that I hear a lot of the time that I don't think is valid. And when they talk about, like, class dichotomy, like, you really think it's fair to say that all proles are like this and all bourgeois people are like this. And the reason that we do that, Marxists do that, and the reason why leftists do that generally, not even just Marxists use that dichotomy. It's a very popular dichotomy that exists in all of leftism. Like even like a Proudhonian anarchist would agree that like the proletariat class and the bourgeois class, they are existent, and the way they work is like how Marx describes them, where they're defined by their relationship with the means of production.
Yeah.
The point of doing that is not to simplify human interactions. It's to create a groundwork to explain complex human interaction.
Exactly.
And I feel like they're trying to it's a mathematical concept that they're talking about, and so it's naturally very simple and objective. But when you apply this type of thinking to humans who don't exist in that way,
exactly,
they don't exist in a simple. It starts falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an
oversimplification.
Yeah, it is. It's also essentialist thought, right? Because when you're talking about geometrical shapes, right, the very thing that defines a triangle is the three sides of it, right? If it doesn't have three sides, then it cannot be a triangle, right? That's like an essentialist idea. But that completely falls apart when you start talking about people. That's a terrible comparison. I mean, the complexity of human existence and interaction is nowhere near as same as the simplicity of how many sides a shape has to have in order to be identified as that shape.
Exactly.
And I think perhaps they're even missing the point of lots of LGBTQ plus movements that talk about how you're assigned to gender. Interact with you, because I think even if you want to use that thinking of like a triangle is defined by three sides and like three corners, the same thing can be said about how social assignment of gender works in capitalist society, or not even in capitalist society because it's not really the right word, in liberal society really, where like why is a woman socially in liberal? Because they have breast and they have a vagina, and so they see that and they make that assignment. But the reason it doesn't work for humans is because we're independent actors capable of independent thought. Just because I materially express something doesn't mean that's how I'm non-materially thinking about it, right? Or it doesn't mean that's how I non-materially identify, and it nullifies that being to have a differentiation between what they materially might be expressing to somebody else who sees them immediately, versus how they would like to self-identify. Because like people with gender dysphoria, they see that too, right? They see that people group them up socially based off what they look like, based off what they perceive them to be materially expressing, and that's why there's a lot of discussion about like passing in trans communities and whether or not somebody is in the eyes of like the average person adequately expressing the gender that they want to identify as.
I think that this argument just kind of like ignores the fact that mankind is like a social men are social beings, essentially. So like our roles in society, the positions in society that we have, those things that we usually say are part of what defines gender, those things are themselves defined by interactions between people. And that, I mean, obviously like a square or a triangle isn't like, it doesn't even have that dimension. You know, like that's the reason why it's so important to differentiate between gender and sex, even though I would say that sex is not really even a binary either. And it's also like an ill-defined term, I think this is another important thing to discuss, and I think something that maybe lots of people about LGBT issues, LGBTQ plus stuff, they might forget, is that intersex people exist, and not everybody, like circles to squares, yes, but there's not just man and woman, even in terms of material expression. Exactly.
There are people who fit into that.
Exactly.
Right. Like, your circle to square thing works until you see a triangle.
Exactly.
Then it's like, and if all you have is like not even a dichotomy, a binary. Yeah, if all you have is a binary, then you're excluding people who don't fit into that binary.
Exactly.
And that binary is based off material expression. And I think that I think, at least in my opinion, I don't necessarily think the same way I do about transgender and issues and gender dysphoria generally.
Yeah.
I don't expect them to see somebody who's not material. It would be nice if they could not make an assumption based off how someone's materially expressing what they non-materially identify as or would like to identify as.
Yeah.
It would be nice if they could make that distinction and like ask people like, what are your pronouns before assuming. Yeah, but I feel like in framing it as if later you'll see why they're doing that. It's because they equate sex and
exactly.
Maybe that's
which is wrong. Yeah.
No, yeah, but paragraph in the next section.
Exactly.
Which gets into their just core misunderstanding to how sex and gender work.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, actually. I was literally just about to say, like, the only way that you can even think this makes sense is if you literally...
Is if you think they're the same.
Yeah, if you think sex and gender are exactly the same. And then we get onto the next paragraph here where it says, sex, gender, and gender fluidity. Is sex important? Attempts have been made to confuse us as to what sex is. Are sex and gender synonyms? Well, they are synonyms, but a certain group of academics in the 70s in the United States decided that they weren't. They were going to use gender in their own way. They were going to use gender to mean the social construct of behavior surrounding what was expected of the biological differentiation among human beings, men and women. You want to chime in there?
Why and sex are gender synonyms? Why do they believe that?
They believe they're synonyms because it was not codified in a way which was visible in Western academia until, and I also want to say this for later on at the end of this paragraph when they talk about this. It was created by when Marxists actually codified it, and they codified the difference between sex and gender. They think that before that codification existed, the distinction did not exist inside of humans, and that's just wrong. The reason why so it was easier to talk about, and to create a way to talk about it intellectually, where I can talk about whether I'm talking about someone's material gender, what they're materially expressing, or what they materially have, like their genitalia, or like whether or not they have breasts or something, versus their social role that's assigned to them as a result of that. And just the fact that they equate the two, it shows a core misunderstanding of that. And maybe it's because they haven't read, maybe they haven't read theory about that. So maybe they do just have a core misunderstanding of that, and they think that it's something which was invented. It's not. I guess my point is just that it's not a social construction, like how they're framing it. The difference between sex and gender, it's not something which was constructed. It's something which has always existed and was just categorized that way, and was just explained, as opposed to constructed.
Yeah, I'll read the... do you want me to read the whole section if you have something to say?
Yeah.
This section as a whole, yeah? Okay, great. But biological differentiation between male and female is a real thing. It doesn't just exist in humanity, it exists in many species throughout the natural world. Sexual reproduction is a natural biological process that has persisted in nature due to the diversity it engenders. It is a phenomenon encountered in the natural world. And let's not forget how this debate impinged upon us. We've been following this ideological trend and encountering identity politics among supporters and candidates for membership because of our party, and amongst people we've been working for at least 3, 4 or 5 years, because IDPol has become a fashion in that period. And it is a fashion, it is a trend, and it suddenly, from being very marginal to certain academic institutions in the 1970s, became mainstream globally worldwide. It was actively promoted. Not promoted by communists or socialists, but picked up on and accepted by many of them because they are led and blindly followed by bourgeois society down this dead end.
That's the point I was going to talk about. They don't understand the history of that idea.
That's completely ridiculous.
Because it was created by Marxists.
Exactly.
It was promoted by communists and by socialists because it was invented by them.
Exactly.
And liberals perhaps have adopted it. And I feel like there are issues with how liberals deal with LGBTQ plus issues. Now they deal with sex and gender.
Huge issues, yeah.
Yeah, there are lots
definitely...
of... that they apply that thinking.
Yeah.
But they're framing it as if liberals invented it, as if bourgeois society invented it, and that we're following it. When in actuality, it was Marxists and Socialists who invented it, and it is bourgeois society which is following it. And it's not towards a dead end, in my opinion. I mean, that's just... I don't know what I can't speak to what they mean by that. Because at least to me, it sounds like a lot of people who are anti-gay, where they talk about it's very reminiscent of when they talk about biological dead ends, and so maybe that's not what they mean. Yeah, but just the phrasing that they used is very.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of feel like when you were talking about sort of queer theory or sort of any intersectionality generally, right? I kind of feel like Marxists have always been in that space. Like Marxist theory has always like pushed those boundaries. I mean, even when you do sort of like feminist queer theory, I mean, especially even within the feminism space, right? Like Marxism has been pushing boundaries in there as well. It's always existed in that space.
Exactly, it has. Currently, I'm reading a text by a Marxist named Mario Miele, and he is from like the 70s era, and he does like kind of put forward this idea that is entirely based on Marxist theory of the division between like between gender and sex, and it's just something that was like common in Marxist circles at that time and has been for a long time. And even from the very beginnings of Marxism, you know what I'm saying, the social difference between men and women has been like the most significant. It has been like it's been like the subject of analysis by Marxists. Like that's the important thing. You know what I'm saying? Like Marxists would say that like the like essentialist conservatives, for example, they to defend the patriarchy would say that men are essentially stronger than women, or men are essentially, you know, I don't know, better physically in whatever way. Marxists always defined the relationship between men and women as a social one, one that's socially defined, and that's where the kernel of the idea that gender is a social construct comes from. You know, it wouldn't exist without Marxist theory, so it's ridiculous to say that it wasn't by communists or by socialists, because it was. Wait.
Just to talk about another, when you talked about that, the biological, like they make lots of naturalistic claims about it.
Yeah.
Where they talk about biological differentiation between men and women is a real thing. And they talk about how it doesn't just exist in humanity. It exists in many species in the natural world. Objectively, that statement's true, right? Biological differentiation between male and female it's an existent thing that's not just in humanity.
Yeah.
But I feel like the issue with saying that and not following it up with another statement which explains that, but that difference is not just biological and human.
Exactly. Because mankind are social beings.
It's not like we're dogs, right? It's not like we're like sheep or something where it is just a like in a lot of species. And I mean there are like I know, for example, like there are instances of different animals expressing like they don't adhere to gender roles necessarily.
Yeah.
Like I read a thing once about it was either rat, and you know for sure it is, because I'm not looking it up right now. I'm just speaking off the top of my head what I've read about it. And there are instances of things like during mating season there might be male rats which go into a female role in mating season, and they'll let other male rats like they'll like court them and they'll like present for them.
Yeah.
And so even in other animals, I was going to say like in humans it's not that simple, but even in other animals it's not that simple.
Yeah.
That's actually exactly what I was going to say as well. Like there are actually many animals even within the natural world that are either intersex or that they can actually switch between biological sexes. Like it's not even like a definite black and white line within the natural world, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a really strange thing.
They're framing it like that as a naturalistic attempt to justify gender as it's natural. Why are you challenging that construction. We can see it's in the natural world, but in reality, if you actually look at how it exists in the natural world, it's not a straight binary in a lot of species. I mean, I'm sure that there probably are species that do have just like a very simple gender binary, and there's not lots of like gray area. I don't know. Again, I'm not a biologist or anything.
Exactly, but
again,
you can't say that
the world works that way.
Yeah.
And at the same time, even if what they were saying were true, human beings don't exist in the natural world the same way that animals exist in the natural world, because we're capable of complex thought.
Exactly.
And that complex thought leads to complex emotions and complex social constructions.
Yeah.
Like gender.
Exactly.
Gender is not simple as whether or not you have a penis or a vagina.
Exactly.
Sex isn't even.
Yeah,
we talked about that earlier. Sex isn't
Yeah.
even that simple in humans.
Yeah.
But they're framing it as if it's a simple binary, not.
Yeah.
Which is the point of lots of queer theory, is to explain like.
No, it's not a simple binary. There's a social dimension to this.
There is a social dimension to this, and even there is in intersex people, there's a biological dimension to this.
Exactly.
It's not. They're framing it as if the natural world is a binary is fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
Which again, maybe it comes. I don't know. I like to use Hanlon's razor, and I invoke that a lot when I'm having discussions, and I disagree with somebody. I like to assume that if someone has an opinion like that, it's because of ignorance and they don't know about it, as opposed to there being malicious.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange because I thought that this kind of way of thinking had been gotten past when, as a society, we accepted homosexual people, right? Because if you think that gender or your sexuality is perfectly tied to what genitalia you have, then homosexual people must just blow your mind, right? You must literally just look at their genitalia and be like, you have to like women, and then you come to the realization, oh wait, that isn't how that works at all, right? So like, why we're still having to have this conversation when, I mean, everyone accepts homosexuality throughout men and women, right? I mean, I say everyone, obviously not everyone, but you know, all reasonable
it's
people.
much more common.
Yeah,
At
exactly.
least in the Western world, it's much more common to find people who are accepting of homosexuality.
Yeah. Generally speaking.
I mean, again, like, fucking idiots exist.
Exactly.
Like malicious, not even just ignorant idiots, like malicious idiots exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like there are people who are malicious about that.
Yeah.
But again, because this person is a Marxist, and at least from their earlier statements where they're quoting some Marxist theory like Lenin and stuff, I like to assume that
they just don't know what they're talking about.
Yes, I would rather assume that they're coming from a place where they haven't done that much research about queer theory or about or about the difference between sex and gender, and so because they don't know the difference, they assume there is no difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also do think there's an element of sort of contrarianism to it, like they just want to be different, and I think we're going to see that in the next sort of paragraph here, where they talk about bourgeois and proletarian politics. They go on to say, we are a party of a different kind. What's the purpose of internal party discourse? What's the purpose of debate? What is the purpose of democratic centralism? It's so that we can, among ourselves, work out the truth, what is in the interest of the working class as a whole. We claim to be the party of the working class, and it's a big claim. Really, we're in the embryonic form. Let's be frank about it. We're not going to be the people and the organisation that finally make the revolution, but we are the beginning of that. We are in the process of building it. We have to earn the right to be trusted by the working class, to bring the best elements of the working class into our ranks and organisation. We must develop broad roots among the masses to be in a position where they even trust and accept anything we're saying. And so we are really only trying to find the truth. The truth is our biggest ally in that process.
Yeah, that's just like general, like what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Every single party says that. Like, it's just like it's like mandatory for like every Marxist-Leninist party. Like,
they are
make
platitudes.
that kind of,
They're platitudes, essentially, right? It's like every party should be for that, right? Like every party should be all about essentially finding the truth, especially if you believe in a sort of materialist conception of an objective reality, right? But it's all about how you do that, right? Even as Marxism as a science is about the process. It's about how you take those steps in order to find the quote-unquote truth, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, go on.
Like you said, there are there are like 20. I think I don't know if you knew that for sure as a fact, but like you said, there are many communist parties in Great Britain. I think you said 20 of them.
Yeah, I think
there are many Marxist and socialist parties.
Yeah.
And like your point about them trying to be contrarian, maybe like their social politics like this is an attempt to differentiate themselves from lots of the other Marxist parties.
Yeah.
So that maybe they
the contrarian element.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is totally possible.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many of the other, communist or socialist parties in the UK take this stance, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were literally, like, the only one, right?
Yeah. It's probably very few of them, because honestly, most communist movements around the world, most communist parties around the world have a better stance than the CPGB-ML on this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of ridiculous that they're still clinging to these like essentialist and conservative positions when this is just not even the status quo, like for communist parties these days.
And maybe this is an attempt to convince conservative elements of the proletariat that their party is the party that will help them because they agree with their reactionary social politics. Because I think at least in America, I don't know the situation in Great Britain. I don't live there, so I don't observe that. But I do like landscaping here, and for the most part, most of the people that I work with, most of them are Catholic. They're like Catholic immigrants from Latin America, and so although their class interests are the same as mine, a lot of their opinions are socially conservative. Or even reactionary sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like they make certain claims like that. So maybe this is an attempt to make Marxism more accessible to conservative and reactionary elements of the working class.
Yeah.
Because they do say like that's one of their goals is to attract the best of the working class so that they can organize towards revolution.
Well, the purpose of a vanguard is to be the most ideologically advanced
exactly. If the vanguard's supposed to be the most ideologically advanced, this would not be a good
they should not be changing their views to match
to
less ideologically or less conscious elements of the working class. That means that they're basically changing their views in order to, like, if that is the reason why, like, subconsciously they've adopted this position, then that means that they are abandoning like an actual proletarian position for ideology.
Yeah.
So which is like the opposite of what the vanguard should do, and it's kind of unfortunate that this has happened.
Yeah.
So perhaps a failure to understand the role of a vanguard.
Yeah, which is
it is.
I don't know.
CPGB-ML,
I feel like we haven't gotten to. I mean, the last paragraph there was a lot to talk about, like wrong with what they were saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This paragraph, I'm trying to rationalize why somebody who is otherwise in adherence to lots of orthodox Marxist opinions, or even just orthodox leftist opinions, about issues generally, why they would elect to have that type of stance
exactly
as a party. Because like I don't know, like I just feel like there has to be a reason why somebody would say that.
Yeah.
Like you don't just as a Marxist party, you don't just one day decide we oppose LGBTQ plus people who are gender fluid.
Exactly.
Just decide that out of the blue. There's a reason why you decide that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this argument is, conservative in the literal nature, right? It literally wants to conserve society's old way of perceiving sex and gender, right? Like it's trying to cling on to a relic of the past, and they want to preserve and conserve it in something that you rarely only see in sort of right-wing conservative movements, right? Like the whole Trump movement thing is "Make America Great Again," right? It's calling back to how things used to be, this old forgotten time.
Which is completely incompatible with like a dialectical viewpoint that society is always changing, and therefore, like exactly.
Yeah. So really.
Our understanding should always.
This paragraph's just really interesting about the psychology of the party.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh man.
Well, let me read the next one. They go on here to say, why deny the material reality of gender? Why did it become a fashion to say there's no such thing as, I assume that says, as male and female? I think the use of our internal bulletin has evolved to the point, interesting, where we actually used it to conduct inner-party debate. The debate came up because of some posts on the party's main Twitter account. The controller of the account was denounced on Twitter as fascist and racist. Is it true, if you're going to get up here at Congress and denounce comrades in debate, we will tell them that if you say X, Y, and Z, then that's it, I'm off, screw the lot of you? Ooh, should I read the whole thing, or do you want to go by this part by part?
It's not a good look.
Yeah.
If you are accused of being fascist and racist in your Communist Party.
It's definitely true.
I think that in that event, like if I were the CPGB-ML or that member of the party or posted that on Twitter, whatever the Twitter post was, I would probably take a moment to look at what I said and the positions that I made and try to understand why
somebody would say that.
Yeah, why people were so mad about that. Because people who are I know leftists throw around the term fascist a lot, and they do throw around the term racist a lot, but if someone is accusing you of having views that are literally oppressive, like the in line with the ideology of oppressors, then that's a problem. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't be trying to reaffirm or defend that view. You should be trying to understand why it's wrong, you know, or why it seems so similar to the ideology of fascists and racist to people.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing for this to happen, right? But it's another thing for them to literally be sort of airing internal party differences outwardly, right? So like write articles about it and then publicize that to the world. Like, we have huge internal issues. Like it's a completely different thing to start writing articles about it. And like why are you even doing this?
Exactly. Oh man.
Yeah, it's pretty strange. They go on to say, is that a comradely way to have a debate? Does that forward our arguments? Does it help us reach a sound understanding? It does not. We've got to reckon with science. We've got to reckon with social phenomena. We have to come to a correct position which serves our class, and if we fail to do so, our organisation will fail to exist.
Well, I think the organization's going to fail to exist.
I mean, on one hand, and this might be a spicy take, I'm going to agree with them that the exact quote that they're using, if we say X, Y, and Z, and then that's it, I'm off, screw the lot of you, it's not a comradely way to debate.
Sure.
And generally, I have an issue with the type of leftist argumentation where if somebody takes a hardline opinion against yours, you're no longer willing to engage in discourse with them. And now, I mean, there's a limit to that. Right? Like, if someone, and again, I apply Hamelon's razor. I'm like, are they saying this because they're malicious, or are they saying this because they're ignorant?
Yeah.
If I think someone's ignorant, if I think like somebody who just like, there's an example that maybe it was you who gave it to me, maybe someone else. It was in the Socialist Patients Collective server.
Yeah.
Where someone said like, I have a Polish friend. She says the N-word. How do I explain to her that's not an okay thing to do?
Exactly.
And the whole point that they made to explain that was like there's no equivalent in the Polish language, and they don't in Poland because they don't have a lot of black people there. There's not a lot of racial tension between European races and like African groups.
Yeah.
So they just don't understand it. And if somebody is ignorant of an issue and they just don't understand why something they said is wrong, right? Like if someone said something that was racist to me and I thought this person is ignorant of why that statement was racist, I would rather engage them in discourse and attempt to explain to them why I think that's not an okay thing to say.
Sure.
They just say like, well, you're a racist.
Exactly.
And I think that in of itself, I think it's a good thing to be opposed to that type of discourse, but there's an extent to that. I don't know what the thing was on Twitter that people called fascist and racist.
Exactly.
So I can't speak authoritatively about whether or not it good response to be like, well, fuck that shit.
Exactly.
or whether people should have engaged them, tried to explain to them, this is why I think this. This is why this is wrong.
It would make it
Exactly.
terrible. It would make it terrible if I managed to find the tweet and it was literally like Hitler did nothing wrong.
Exactly.
We're all here trying to be like, well, maybe, and it's just like, oh.
Exactly.
Again, I don't know what they said. But I think they are correct in saying it is a much more constructive way to have discussions to actually reckon. I mean, I don't like that we've got to reckon with science, we've got to reckon with social phenomena, because I don't think that whoever the speaker is, I don't know their name. Maybe it says at the top of the article. If one of you guys wants to look up there for me.
The writer of this article.
Yeah, or the because I think this is a transcription of a speech.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a transcription from a speech from a party meeting that someone was giving.
I mean, it says it's by Kat, which is a female. Yeah.
Okay.
She's kind of like a higher up in the party.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't think that in this particular discussion that Kat is having, I don't think they are reckoning with science or social phenomena. I think they're outright denying science and social phenomena when they make some statement like that sex and gender are the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, judging from like the really negative response that whatever comrade denounced the person who made the post for, I mean, judging from the words that they use, like, you know what I'm saying, like it did have to be something that was like a really conservative position. And my thing is, like, from an individual point of view, why like be part of a party that just has like a conservative position? First of all, part of that is a product of the actual social makeup of the party. There are a lot of communist parties that actually do have like let's say trans people, people of color, different other LGBT people, women, etc., etc. You know, in the high ups, like like the Politburo or like the upper echelons of the party, or just like a lot of members of the party that are part of those marginalized groups. However, some communist parties, and I imagine the CPGB-ML is like this, because that's the only way I can see that, you know, this is the only way I can imagine that it could be possible for an entire party to actually vote on taking up this line. The CPGB-ML probably composed of people who are not marginalized, who are, probably not POC, not LGBT, et cetera, et cetera. And so then it just becomes a matter of, is my goal really to try to convince people who not only like are going to have trouble, like significant amount of trouble comprehending the predicament that my group is in, just because of their social status, but also have taken a position that is just worse than that of like all sorts of other groups that maybe also are made up of people who are not necessarily part of marginalized groups but still have an accurate position, you know what I'm saying, on these matters. Like, it's just like it doesn't seem worth it to go through the effort of trying to fight for a genuinely progressive position and engage in that discourse. So I can understand why a comrade would just be like, honestly, if you have these positions, I'm not going to be part of your party. You know what I'm saying? Like,
not even just being a part of the party, just engaging with the things that...
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a strange position to take if you're literally trying to be the party of the working class, to literally alienate certain parts of them on an issue like this, right? Needlessly as well. Like, there's no real position, there's no real reason for them to take this antagonistic position, right? Like, they want to be the party of the working class, except all of those sections of it that you're literally alienating by putting an opinion out there like this, right?
Exactly.
And so
this alienated people of 19 other options, though.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess with Marte's, it's a very strange thing to do, especially within the context of if Great Britain has a lot of if you have a lot of options for which party to support.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems strange for them to take such a heterodox hard line.
Yeah, it does.
And want an issue which is necessarily going to upset people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like they took a fucking like veganism or something, where it might upset some people, but like most people.
This is like an issue that would upset a lot of people. This is,
I would guess, would upset most people involved in the left.
Exactly. And
it has. Like you guys said, if it's making its rounds in leftist discords and on Reddit and stuff, it had that effect where it upset most of the people who are involved with leftist politics.
No, it's funny that they say that marginalized people that espouse some sort of identity politics are divisive, but really this is divisive. Yeah.
It's also that thing about like being anti-idpol is an identity. Like you're literally setting up an identity where you're anti everyone else, right? Like that is now part of your identity. You've literally advertised yourself as an identity that's anti-identity.
Exactly.
It's really strange. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this party going forward as well, because I don't like to make predictions, right? But it does seem like there is an internal antagonism here, just philosophically, between like trying to be the vanguard party in the most progressive way possible, while also trying to hold on and conserve these sort of old traditionalist ways. It seems like that's a complete antagonism there. I don't see how that can reconcile itself, really.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if I were going to make a prediction, I would think that there's probably going to be some kind of split resulting from this. Yeah. Or the party will fall apart or something.
Yeah, I feel like, and I feel like it's just something where it's not something where you can agree to compromise. If you're a member of the party and you disagree with, actually, this might be interesting to look in. What is Motion 8 exactly?
I mean, at the top there, they even linked it. It's a hyperlink, and when you, I went through this yesterday. It said that identity politics are anti-Marxian and a harmful diversion from the class struggle. So it says here, while being totally opposed to discrimination on grounds of race, sex, or sexual proclivity, this Congress declares that an obsession with identity politics, including sexual politics, is anti-Marxian.
I feel like members of that is something where I feel like you cannot compromise if you're a member of disagree with that statement.
It's actually,
it would be extremely difficult for me, like, of course within a party, because of it's democratic, you aren't going to please everybody with every single position the party takes.
But the fact that it's centralist will, like, makes this makes this an actual serious contradiction. Like, if there are people elements who genuinely, which I'm sure that there are, that genuinely disagree with this position.
I don't know
in the party. Which I guess this person who wrote this article did mention that, that there was disagreement over this.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to really be allowed to like freely express that disagreement, because freedom and debate, unity and action.
Mm-hmm.
So that might actually result in a split. That's probably what the result of this contradiction will be.
Even if not a split in the party, at least just like they're going to hemorrhage.
Yeah, they're going to lose members. Yeah.
I mean, I feel I don't know for sure because I don't know if anyone's talking about who was a member of the party who's left. But I feel like it almost certainly that Motion 8 that they took, that hardline that they took, I feel like it almost certainly caused a portion of the party to leave.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if that
it seems like they've solved this problem themselves, because they go on to say, Congress therefore resolves that the propagation of identity politics, including LGBT ideology, is reactionary and anti-working class and a harmful distraction and diversion from the class struggle of the proletariat for social emancipation, and is therefore incompatible with membership of this party, rendering those involved in its promotion liable to expulsion.
Yeah. There is going to be like
just the language that they use too. It's not just we don't agree with this, it's a situation where they go as far as to say these things are reactionary.
Yes, this is bourgeois ideology. Like they actually
working class and a harmful distraction.
Again, and I think I talked about Marte when I first read the article. Was just like there's a difference between not understanding it that much and so not involving yourself. Like if Motion 8 was just we're not going to talk about issues because this isn't what the party concerns itself with. If that was it, that would be that. It might not be a good thing and it might upset people. But that wouldn't be an issue where people are going to want to leave the party or split from the party.
Exactly.
It would just be an issue where it's like, all right, well, this is the space to talk about that. And I feel like that is. It might be unfortunate in this particular case, but I feel like it's fine. And I feel like it's good to have parameters about, like, this is what the party is concerned. Like, if their whole line was just, like, we strictly concern ourselves with...
class.
With class. And that's what we want to talk about as a party. And so we're not going to have any more debates about identity politics with the party. That would be fine. But they go as far as to say, not only do we not want to talk about it anymore, we oppose it, and it's bourgeois ideology, and it's something
that is like really, that's egregious. Like
it's not just walking away from a discussion; it is saying we are now the opposition in the discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally setting up that as the enemy, right? It's like, when you talk about something being bourgeois, like, that's not just we're gonna not talk about this anymore. That's literally like, that is an active enemy of our position.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is holy fuck, that's really hard.
It's really
that is extremely hard line. Like, there's this party in the States called the African People's Socialist Party, and I've been, like, looking into it, because, like, there's, like, certain positions that have to do with class and, like nation and stuff that I agree with, but they kind of put the like LGBT issues and like women's issues, etc., on the back burner, and they kind of say that all of those issues are like secondary to the issue of the liberation of black people and the destruction of capitalism and imperialism, etc., which I kind of find problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but that's less problematic than seeing those
things and saying those things are reactionary.
Yeah, viewpoints as completely reactionary,
as completely incompatible. A Marxist perspective.
Exactly.
I was going to say Shante Alston, he was a former member of the Black Panther Party.
Yeah,
and he is kind of like the go-to person when people talk about black anarchism or panther anarchism.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the go-to theorist for that.
Yeah.
And he talked about near the end of the Black Panther Party's lifespan, where people would try to, like, the younger members of the party, they try to have discussions and debates about things like liberation of women, or things like LGBT issues.
Yeah.
But he said that, like, lots of the people who've been in the party for a long time are like, we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And again, that's problematic.
That's a problem.
That's a problem. But that is not nearly as. But that is completely incompatible with my perspective. And
exactly.
If you think that, you need to get out the party.
Exactly.
It's also a symptom of potential other problems as well, right? Because if you literally have a party that's culture fosters, like, anti-idpol, essentially, like, that's just people who agree with LGBT, what they would call ideology, right? That's not even saying anything against the people themselves. So imagine, like, what do these people actually think of transsexual people, right? Like, not even, you know, straight people that would agree with LGBT ideology, but actually, exactly. Like, if you have this view just on the quote-unquote ideology, then what other views do you have around these types of people that are ultimately going to be problematic, right?
Exactly.
I mean, like calling every single LGBTQ plus person mentally ill, or where they talk about them as, like I said, dead end. Where that's not, they didn't exactly say that, but I feel like that's a very common thing to hear from somebody who is opposed to LGBTQ plus people. Is like it's some type of biological dead end.
Yeah.
And I feel like it opens up a space for those type of conclusions to be reached.
Exactly.
Which, and I hadn't even considered that. I hadn't even considered all I thought about until you just said that in regards to this article and in regards to their perspective on that is just like, that's a bad perspective. How about it? I didn't think about what are the logical conclusions they will draw from.
Yeah. Because if they're willing to put this out there, like, you can only imagine what the sort of like internal party leadership is talking about privately, right? Like, if they're willing to put these views publicly, then you can only infer what they have internally, privately, right?
Yeah. Not good.
Not good at all. Where did we get to? So, if we fail to do so, our organisation will fail to exist. Not that the working class won't achieve their salvation without us, it's our firm belief that they will be able to, but will they be put back in the process if we do not evolve the leadership that is capable and worthy of the name of actually interpreting the world and Britain and leading them forward? Yes, they will be set back enormously. We know how difficult it is to get a foothold and a correct orientation. Ooh. I hate to break it to you, but you're still not there.
It's more difficult than you think, apparently.
To develop and hold a class position that's capable of leading working people. It's been a problem, and it's been a problem not just because it's hard in itself, but it's been a problem because there has been an active class whose interest it is to prevent us. The British capitalist class is not passive, they're not idle, and they're perfectly happy to troubleshoot problems. They don't have all the answers ready-made, but they have the levers of power and they have capital. So they can take an intellectual worker, they can set him a problem, and when he comes up with a solution they find workable, they employ him, and when they put their divisive ideas into practice in a little case study somewhere, and that seems to be working quite well, they can roll it out. Okay.
I mean, this. I feel like this directly gets into what we were just talking about, where the difference between just like how they how they perceive those perspectives, versus how they perceive those actual people. Like, just disagreeing with queer analysis is one.
Yeah.
But going as far as to say people who write, because this is what they're saying really in intellectual work. They're talking about make case studies about sex and gender.
Exactly.
And they perceive those people who are doing as necessarily tools of a capitalist class.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It makes me feel icky. I don't like it.
Yeah.
This is exactly what you're. It's like, what are they talking about?
Oh god.
This is what they're talking about in their.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's really strange that, like, it's conspiratorial, right? They literally think that, like, they're getting in smoke-filled rooms and, like, employing people to come up with this ideology whole cloth and then, like, roll it out to the general public. Like,
exactly.
Very strange.
Oh my god.
Class analysis seems alien to many workers in Britain because it's gone out of fashion. It's gone out of fashion because it's been deliberately denounced and ridiculed from every pulpit, every university, every fount of learning. From the kindergarten right through to getting your PhD and becoming a lecturer, you're rewarded if you do certain things. In industry and in science, you're rewarded if you provide any kind of technology or medicine that's going to make money.
Okay, well...
You know what's really weird?
What?
This is as an aside. It's like weird being a third worldist and hearing them talk about how, like, class analysis is going out of fashion, but they still, like, hold to class analysis, because I really feel like the CPGB-ML has a really twisted view of, like, political economy and their actual, like, position. Like, the position of, like, their, like, with, like, the labor aristocracy and everything, like, I feel like they actually have, like, an incorrect view of, like, class analysis. Yeah. So it's like, it's just strange. It's like this. Exactly. Yeah. For me to hear them say that, like, one of our central arguments, like third world, is that, like, political economy is just as important in Marxism today as it has always been, and that's the reason why we have this position. And so to hear them say this is ridiculous. Yeah. And the funny thing is that most third worldist groups have a correct opinion on like, you know, gender and, like, you know what I'm saying, like, you know what I'm saying, like, non-problematic opinion on it that's way more progressive than the CPGB-ML's position. So it's crazy that, like, people that actually take class analysis more seriously than this party, at least in my opinion, don't find that to be a problem.
I think also really interesting is the language that they're using.
Yeah.
Where they say that class analysis has gone out of fashion.
Yeah.
And earlier in the article, they talk about how politics have come into fashion. And what you said earlier, it sounds almost conspiratorial.
Yeah.
It's as if they're framing it as if the capitalist class saw leftists talking about class analysis.
Yeah.
And they decided that class analysis was, and I think it's indicative of a larger problem in leftism, which I talk about a lot now. And this is a belief that identity politics exists as a hurdle for achieving class, for talking about class politics. And the way that they think that people analyze things like sex and gender, or analyzing things like race, is a distraction from class analysis. And I feel like that's it. It's just
a ridiculous view.
Yeah, it's a very
you can't perform an accurate class analysis
without
of a group
considering
without
identity.
considering all of those factors, without considering race,
identity is military class.
Yeah,
it's not it. When people are taught, when at least leftists are talking, I mean, again, it's different when like a liberal is talking about LGBTQ plus issues or race issues.
Yeah,
their reasoning is different. Their reasoning is they see the only issue as these things.
Exactly.
And I think to be topical, as Isaac talked about debate yesterday about in reference to Donald Trump, where he said the liberals who will they'll talk about how bad Donald Trump is, but they won't talk about the systems in place which created a situation where Donald Trump could come to exist.
Yeah.
So when liberals talk about it, they're talking about the symptoms of the issue, and the issue is capitalism.
Exactly.
When leftists talk about it, and I feel like they're conflating leftist discussions of identity
with
politics
liberal. Yes.
When a leftist is talking about something like queer issues, or talking about something like race issues,
yeah,
what they're talking about are these factors to identity and how these factors influence the perspective of the class as a whole.
Yeah,
like the Black Panther Party, they did not see the struggle for Black liberation as the end of the struggle generally.
Exactly,
it was a motivation to class analysis.
Exactly,
not a hurdle that they think about it. Instead of it, think about it as like, if you want to think about like revolution as like a train.
Yeah.
Which is like a very old way to think about revolution.
Yeah.
But the Black Panther Party, or like queer analysts, they're seeing these identity issues as fuel for the train that is revolution and class analysis.
Exactly.
But instead of viewing it like that, the Communist Party of Great Britain decides to view identity as a hurdle to like a barrier in the way of the train.
Exactly.
It's something that's preventing the class from achieving its goals, not something which helps the class achieve its goals.
Exactly. Then even on top of that, like, it's like it would be just as incorrect to try to understand it's incorrect to try to understand, like, the Black Panther Party. They were the Black Panther Party. They organized around being black for the reason that they could not just organize upon purely class lines, because the conditions, the position, the social position of black workers and black lumpen was different fundamentally from the position of white workers. It just was. Or in a British context, the position of, say, Irish workers is different from the position of the regular, like, mother country working class. So it's like, you can't divorce those two things. You cannot divorce, say, race and class. You can't divorce gender and class either. You know, if they read Marxist feminists, if they read Marxist queer theorists, if they read Marxists who wrote about decolonization or national liberation and race, they would understand this. But I mean, clearly they haven't, or they just, have, but decided to take a conservative position anyway against all of it.
I feel like it's a wider issue in certain, especially people that try to adhere to a very pure type of orthodox Marxism.
Yeah,
where they don't want to discuss anything outside of class because they don't see how these things influence class.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's a really, really, really big problem. It's impossible to make it up that way. It's just not possible.
I mean, I think it was. Is it Mao's quote that like women hold up half the sky or something? I think is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it's always been the idea that the people's revolution has always come hand in hand with like the cessation of oppression of marginalized people, right? Like be them women or black people, etc. Right? Like you can't have one without the other.
Exactly.
And I think the mistake this party makes here is that it literally sees them as like mutually exclusive. It's almost like they have to make a choice. It's like,
exactly. Which is not true. It's a false dichotomy.
That either people will be LGBTQ plus people will be liberated, or the class will be liberated.
Exactly.
We choose the class. When in reality, the class is not liberated until LGBT plus people are also liberated.
Exactly.
Because they're part of the class.
LGBTQ plus people will not be liberated unless the class is liberated. So it's like
it's not. It's a mutual relationship, and they exist within the same system. It's not two separate things.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, I'd be really interested in like how they came to this conclusion, if that makes sense. Like, what, like you said earlier, like what happened in order for them to take this position on this issue.
Yeah,
what went wrong?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it literally is like a what went wrong. Like,
how did they fall in this bar?
What happened in those debates about Motion 8? Who said what to make them think, this isn't okay?
Yeah. Let's keep reading here. Keeping workers economically, intellectually, and ideologically subordinate. When I went to medical school, I had an erudite, intellectual, self-satisfied, pompous, English, upper middle class, Oxford graduated professor. He had a degree of respect and notoriety, became a millionaire. He discovered and developed the proton pump inhibitor that went on to become a drug, omeprazole. It's just one of those things. It's a key part he played in inventing the drug. It reduced his stomach acidity. And then he goes on here to say that someone phoned him from Wall Street and said, I was amazed that someone from Wall Street even knew about my research. And the Wall Street capitalist asked him one question. He said, this medicine, would you have to take it for a certain period of time, or would you have to keep taking it to get its effects? The professor said, well, you see, you'd have to keep on taking it. The caller replied, oh, well, thank you very much, that's fascinating. His discovery went on to become one of the pharmaceutical industry's huge money-making drugs rolled out worldwide simply because you'd have to keep on paying. It doesn't solve the problem. To keep gastro symptoms at bay, you have to take it lifelong, so the drug was viewed by the industry as an almost limitless source of revenue. In the field of science, why is it that such huge amounts of money are put into the latest research to develop endovascular stents, which is going to cost 50 grand to treat a single patient, when you could actually get rid of much of the problem by stopping the community from smoking? You could have spent those billions of dollars to develop a program of preventative health care, but instead they developed treatments for wealthy inhabitants of a very small number of overwhelmingly industrial countries and certain healthcare systems, making huge amounts of money. How do we spend on malaria research or tuberculosis research, or even realizing how aspirin can be used to treat certain conditions? Use and application of cheap drugs that you can't patent are not pursued or promoted. There is a vested interest of the capitalist class to accumulate capital through the exploitation of their wage slaves.
Okay, I just want to say this.
Mm-hmm.
It really goes to show the shallowness of the theory being presented in this article.
Mm-hmm.
How much this article is just filler. Like the fact that this article is just there's so much of it that's just these long extended. Like I know he's probably going somewhere with it, but like there's so much in this article that it's just like long extended.
It's anecdotes, right?
That's what I'm looking for. Like anecdotes, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the topic. Mm-hmm. It is just fluff. And it kind of shows that there's not that much that can be said in defense of their viewpoint. So they padded the article, I feel.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe subconsciously this is the case.
I mean, I think what they're trying to do here is they're trying to use this as a defense of why LGBT plus ideology exists, right? They're trying to say that literally, like, capitalists can make money from this by selling drugs, therefore it must come from the capitalist class, simply because they can make money from it, right?
Oh my god!
If what they're implying is that hormone replacement therapy exists as a capitalist scheme.
Oh, that's like a high level conspiracy theory.
I don't know if that's what they're again. this would be implicit, not explicit. But if you're right, and if that was the point of saying all that,
yeah, I mean that's what I took away from this while reading it. Like I might be completely wrong, but that's like where my mind went, because they're literally talking about, like she literally goes on to say, would you have to keep on taking this, or and he said no, to keep these symptoms at bay you have to take it lifelong, right? And then therefore the industry sees it as a limitless source of revenue. Now I don't know if hormones have to be taken lifelong. Like they might not. Like I don't really know. But
it's not a thing. Like HRT takes time, and you have
oh my god! It's the problem with it is that it's just a conspiracy.
Oh yeah,
I think they're trying to imply that, or they're trying to talk about again, like they again, like I was talking about, they view this as a hurdle towards revolution, where they're trying to think about it as if the fact that like they think about it as an alternative to a better solution, which is just talking about class.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, like we said earlier, where it's not mutually exclusive, and these things have to coincide with one another in order to be meaningful. But I'm just thinking about this conspiracy because like you said earlier, it's the difference between what they're putting out publicly and what these things say about what they're talking about insularly.
Absolutely.
And not publicizing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can definitely read that as a discussion about like the use of HRT or the use of different that's
right. Yeah, because they're literally like in their head they're thinking, okay, like all people that are transitioning are now a market, right? And they think that there's literally this capitalist class that looks at this market and thinks this is a market, we can sell drugs to these people, so let's release an ideology to promote LGBT ideology so that we can keep selling them, right? Like these drugs or whatever they think is going on here.
Oh my god.
See, I mean, to talk about that for a second, I think that and I think this is also the issue with how liberals talk about things like this.
Yeah.
Because I 100% believe that a lot of capitalists, they see LGBTQ plus movements, and they see potential to commercialize.
Yes, that is true.
And the same thing happened with Black liberation in America.
Yeah.
It became something that capitalists could commercialize.
A commodity.
Yeah, it became. They turned identity into commodity.
It's the process of commodification. You know?
But the way that they talk, and again, this comes. I think it definitely comes from a point where they don't understand that this theory came from Marxists and Socialists.
Exactly. That's where it gets conspiracy theory.
This is where it gets conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Because they think that these ideas are coming out of capitalists who are funding it, when in actuality, these ideas aren't coming from capitalists.
Yeah.
Or from liberals. These ideas are, for the most part, coming out of leftist academia. It's coming from people opposed to commercialization.
I mean, another problem here with this is that if you want to make the comparison between what they're saying here about, you know, these drugs and LGBT people, then what you have to believe is literally that, like, to be transitioning or something is a disease, right? Like something that you can release preventative healthcare for. Because they literally talk about, like,
that is super problematic.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Hold on.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut.
Yeah, because they literally say you could use.
They think. Yeah, if I mean this,
we just
presented. What could this file?
And all of them are bad.
And all of them are bad.
Yeah.
It comes from a place of extreme ignorance about who's actually making it. One comes from a place where they think that it's a capitalist conspiracy to commercialize HRT, and the other, I think the one you just in which
it's kind of in line with the idea that, like, this whole, like, viewpoint that they're pushing here.
That trans issue. It's something that we can
bourgeois
prevent.
ideology. That all just leads to these, like, disturbing conclusions that trans people are actually diseased, mentally ill people.
That we can not just prejudice. It's not saying, like, gender dysphoria is a mental illness which should be treated. It's not like they're saying that.
Yeah.
What they would be implying in their reading that gave, which I think is a very real possibility into how they think this has anything to do with LGBTQ plus gender fluidity, really, which is the discussion topic that they started with originally.
Yeah.
that that they think it's preventative. They think they can prevent these things from occurring. That's like extraordinarily reactionary.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty strange.
Oh my god.
That's like taking the discussion to like fucking like medieval times.
Exactly.
That's fucking that's insanity.
Oh my god, that's like the
and again because they're not being explicit, I can't tell what they mean.
Right.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is what makes the article so problematic, is not explicit enough with what they're talking about when they give these big anecdotes or they ask the rhetorical questions. They aren't explicitly saying what they mean.
But I feel like if they did explicitly say what they meant,
I don't know if I want them.
They would hemorrhage many more members and really from the left more than they already have.
Yeah.
Because those positions would just be like undeniably. I mean, I guess they're already like the positions that are explicitly like stated in this
are already terrible.
Article so far are already terrible, but those would just be like out of this world.
It's fucking Ragnarok.
I could be wrong, right? Because I literally am having to infer from the article.
Because they don't say.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I can think of...
to do with it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But the only thing I can think of here is, like, if you didn't think that it was a disease, why would you talk about usefully spending those billions of dollars to develop a program of preventative healthcare, right? And then they literally compare it to, like, malaria research or tuberculosis research. So do they think that these scientists should be doing, like, LGBT research, like... and developing preventative healthcare? Like, I don't...
That's like the conservative position that you can, like, do some kind of, like, it's like
what do they call it?
Gay conversion therapy thing.
Like it's some type of...
God.
And they think it's preventative, and that if we did enough research, there'd be easy fix to it, and we would have to have difficult discussions about gender.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and you gave me a lot of insight into that, because a lot of those things that you just said, I hadn't even considered. What if this is what they mean by this?
Yeah.
Like when I read it, I was just like, oh, well, this is like Martin. You're like, oh, this is just padding.
Exactly.
This has nothing to do with the topic. Why are they saying this? But that's because I'm not thinking about their perspective on this.
Exactly.
And with the perspective which they laid out in the paragraphs, it would be completely consistent for. Gender dysphoria is something that we can prevent.
Yeah.
Or for them to say that, like, we need preventative therapy for gender fluidity.
Exactly.
That'd be completely consistent. And that's why this is more like the reactionary nightmare of the Communist Party grapefruit.
Exactly. Oh my god, that would be a very...
You should title the episode that.
Yes, that's what it's gonna be. Yes,
I'll do that.
Because that's...
Oh my god.
But yeah, it's just that as I was reading it, that's how it read to me. I was like... And initially I thought it was padding as well, but I quickly asked myself, like, why is this your padding, right? Like, what are you trying to get at here? And then when I realised that they started talking about the call from the Wall Street person who said, oh, do you have to keep taking this? Oh, well, now the drug is now viewed by our industry as a limitless source of revenue. So I don't know, it just sort of screamed to me like, that's kind of the direction they're trying to take it, right? Like,
I feel like if they just wanted, if they community, they're going to need to explicitly say what they mean, and they better have some damn good explanation.
Oh yeah.
Because what did any of this have to do with gender? Because the three things we could think of were all pretty fucking bad.
Exactly.
Bourgeois ideology in culture, the hypocrisy of the mantra of objectivity. But then there is also an ideological outlook. Science and the arts are not alien to bourgeois influence. Lenin wrote a very beautiful article in 1905 in which he called for the intellectual class to be partisan. He said, don't be neutral, don't say art for art's sake, don't pretend that your output, funded and commissioned by the possessors of money, the capitalist ruling class, is intellectually neutral output. Call a spade, become and state fearlessly that you are fierce advocates of the working people, and that their only way to better develop and their only way to a better society is to develop a liberating culture, a culture of proletarian revolutionary ideology. You have to be openly partisan. That was his call in art, in culture, and in science.
So yeah, I think this is them using twisting Lenin in order to provide the pretext for them to take a position of to argue against the actual scientific basis of some of the argument for gender fluidity. I mean, I think that even if because I mean, maybe they're not necessarily going to go that far with it, but even that idea within the party, it sets up the possibility for when they're confronted with the argument that say sex is not a binary, sex is a spectrum. There are, you can't, what do you even mean when you say sex? Do you mean what chromosomes people have? Because there's a whole lot, variety of options, you know what I'm saying, or possibilities when it comes to that. Or do you mean what kind of genitalia people have? Because there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to that too. When they're confronted with that argument, they can literally, it's the bourgeois influence on science.
Yeah, I think that's what
that has caused that objective conclusion to come being. So we're going to be partisan and just completely deny science there.
I'm excited for this.
Yeah, that's an anti-materialist position. Yeah. Not really what Lenin meant.
Very strange, very strange.
I'm excited for the next part because they're going to say what the Twitter post said.
Oh man.
Oh dear.
Forgot that.
Okay, sex and sexual identity. So the question is sexuality. How does this tie up with the question of sexuality? And we come back to that innocuous post on Twitter, which I thought was obviously hilarious because I thought it was non-controversial. We wrote, there is a group of self-proclaimed socialists who are not actually any longer fighting against our oppression, they're fighting against reality, and posted a link to an article. Why did we say that? There's a circle of people who broke away from a very small group, which you may know, called the RCG. They wrote a blog post called Red Fight Back, and their bottom line is that their position is there's no such thing as gender. Rather, gender, they claim, is some kind of medical conspiracy where at birth the doctors go away and huddle together. What's going on? And they assign a gender role to you. So pregnant mothers, when you have your 20-week ultrasound scan, you're not having a scan to see whether your baby is a boy or a girl, say Red Fight Back. No, that's all medical conspiracy. And when the baby is born, they inspect the baby to say it's a boy or a girl. Well, that's all medical conspiracy too. These things, boys, girls, men and women, aren't real, don't you see?
Oh my god!
That's what...
Yeah! To start with, first of all, did they really... okay. Oh my god, I don't even know where to start with this, actually.
It comes from... It all comes from that core misunderstanding of what gender and sex is and the difference between the two.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Because when people are talking about... People are talking about assigned gender, they're talking about what your doctor writes in your birth certificate.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or they get it from
and the social roles that you're expected to conform to.
Yeah, because of what...
Exactly. Which they wrote because of whatever your genetic... Yeah. This, oh my god.
Yeah, this is why people called you fascist.
Yeah.
This makes sense. I mean, I'm not saying that... I'm not a fan of Marte said earlier, where he's I think fascist is thrown around a lot in leftist circles for things which aren't necessarily fascism.
Yeah,
and I don't think this is necessarily indicative of how a fascist would talk about gender.
Yeah,
but
they're definitely conservative,
reactionary.
Yeah, reactionary.
And I can see how somebody who may be familiar with what the foundations of fascism are in terms of its theory. And are more just concerned with what fascism was historically and materially. Yeah, they would see that and say that sounds like some fascist shit.
Exactly.
Because also, holy shit.
Yeah. There's also that thing where why would you rely on your a group you're against to explain what their position is, if that makes sense? It's clearly they don't agree with this group called Red Fight Back, so why would I listen to CPGB-ML's description of what their position is, right?
Exactly.
They're obviously not going to frame it in a way that is,
It's
generous.
honest.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can definitely tell that there's some intellectual dishonesty going on here.
Sure.
The next section, I want to read it really quickly. Now that seemed to us to be absurd and preposterous. Now that seemed to us to be so absurd and preposterous that we posted it. And that post seemed popular. It had like 100,000 views with hundreds of comments saying you're a TERF. That is trans-exclusionary reaction. That statement.
Yeah,
that these people are
opposing
material reality, and the material reality is that your sex is your gender.
Exactly.
That is trans-exclusionary.
Exactly.
That's literally that you are a TERF.
That is what that is. You've just defined it. Like,
yeah, that's the reason that people said that. And that's the reason.
Oh my god.
And that's the reason ultimately why it got trafficked so much, because people probably thought it was insane that a Marxist party said that in 2019.
And once again, I find it very curious that they got hundreds of comments saying that this position was reactionary, that this was a TERF position.
Yep.
And they didn't analyze what they said.
And they didn't
seriously think about why people think that.
Self-crit. Yeah. Like, self-criticism is necessary.
Oh, of course.
Communists need to do that. They don't need to just like try to defend
not just communists,
whatever like
every single human being.
People.
in the context of having a
party. Having a party, you definitely need to
like criticism and self-criticism are important.
Of course.
Communists shouldn't just like have this like set position and then just defend it no matter what without actually looking at like the response to the position that they've gotten from people in general, without looking at the ideological content of their position, without trying to investigate whether their position conforms with material reality. Like, there needed to be some self-criticism there, and that self-criticism wasn't done.
It was the opposite of self-criticism.
Exactly.
It's like doubling down.
Exactly. Instead of like where you said doubling down, it's like if they were playing a card game, instead of folding, and thinking about how they got there,
exactly,
when they were losing money, they were like, "I'm gonna double down."
Exactly.
Let's put all my chips, all my chips on the table for this one.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that is an issue. Maybe I didn't know that much about. I saw this article.
Yeah.
Maybe that is just an issue within the party leadership and how they conduct themselves. Maybe they don't self-critique enough.
Yeah. And that's
maybe just party. Seeing all those comments on the post that they made, which was very obviously like conservative and not even conservative. I'd call it reactionary.
Yeah.
With where the point where liberal culture is now in terms of social issues, I would call it reactionary.
Yeah, it's a backwards viewpoint.
It's not even in line with conserving the current liberal perspective.
Exactly.
It wants to move the perspective back to where it was a few years ago. So I feel like the fact that they saw that and they didn't think, why do people think this about us?
Yeah.
And how can we explain ourselves better, or why were we wrong?
Yeah.
And they thought...
Instead they went, let's write an article to prove them correct.
Exactly. That's a problem.
But they go on here to say, I didn't know what a TERF was at that point, but I've since found out it's an acronym for Trans-Exclusionary Radical Feminism, which I'm not, because I'm not a feminist. But essentially their line is that anyone who would purport to say that actually, that there really is such a thing as gender, men and women, is some kind of fascist. So again, you see them making the mistake between gender being sex and men and women.
They conflate the two as being the same thing.
But we already know that that's their position, right? Because they said it earlier that they're literally synonyms. So we're going to see that throughout the whole thing. Cause
also, I just want to point out the speaker's female, right? Like you said, her name was Kat.
Yeah.
She's not a feminist, and she's a Marxist.
Because feminism is impulse.
Yeah.
Even though, like, oh my god,
that is such a fucking not a feminist.
It's really
I can't understand that for a Marxist. I've never met somebody who self-identifies Marxist in like any tendency.
Yeah.
Or even socialist. Yeah, like there's socialists who aren't interested, who are even reactionary in terms of like liberation of women.
Yeah.
Who are I'd still say are technically socialist, but a Marxist because I just feel like because Marxist analysis concerns itself so much with moving forwards.
Exactly.
And understanding forwards towards something else.
Exactly.
For somebody to say, I'm not a feminist authoritatively, and call themselves a Marxist is just it's very heterodox.
Yeah, it's extremely unusual.
Extraordinarily unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why. Yeah, it's just so strange. They go on to say, who is pushing this ideology that there's no such thing as gender, that there is no such thing as sex, that it's not even real. There is a movement called ableism or trans-ableism. There exist people who say, I look as if I've got 2 arms or 2 legs, but in reality I feel like I was born disabled.
This is the helicopter meme.
This is the helicopter. This is mid 2010s. Fucking, I'm on 4chan/poll.
Yeah.
Look at this funny otherkin thing that I found on Tumblr.
Exactly.
This is the ultimate straw man.
Exactly.
They're not again. Notice how they'll cite their own tweet and they'll cite the article that they linked in their tweet, but they won't cite this.
Exactly.
Because I mean I don't know for sure, but I supremely doubt that someone actually says that.
Yeah.
And if they do say that, that has nothing to do with
gender
or even ableism.
Exactly.
And I also like
I love how they use that to critique ableism or like to denounce ableism as
I like also how they're grouping ableism up with trans ableism, which I don't even know if that's a real thing. Perhaps it is.
But
if what they quoted is like an actual opinion of trans ableists, I'd like to have a conversation with one and figure out.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, also, okay, just also the way they phrase this as well. Look, I've got 2 arms and but in reality, I feel like I was born disabled. This is how and to talk about, like, they use trans ableism in particular. This is how and where you talked about earlier, like, how do they think of trans people? This is how they're analyzing trans people.
Exactly.
They're analyzing trans woman as somebody saying, like, look, I have a penis, but in actuality... In reality, I'm a woman. But that's not how gender dysphoria works, and that's not how trans identity works.
Exactly.
No trans woman is saying that.
Exactly.
For the most part. I don't want to speak because I don't want to speak for every trans woman ever, but every trans woman I've met, they don't make statements like that about their gender.
Exactly.
They understand how material reality, like they will understand the fact that I might before I transition, I materially express as a male in terms of my sex.
Exactly.
So people extrapolate because of gender roles and because of the role of gender in society. That this is how I should be.
Yeah, most trans people do not consider gender feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like
gender. It's not. That's how they think about it. They think that these people are denying reality.
Exactly.
And that's just because I don't know if it's because I'm gonna invoke Hamelon's razor. When I would stop saying this person's ignorant, I would say this is a malicious. This is a malicious thing to say.
Exactly.
I don't because that's not based off what anyone's actually saying.
Exactly.
Like they're being malicious about how trans people act, and I think it would be interesting if you guys on a different podcast, if you had a trans person on the podcast to have them talk about that.
Oh, we can.
I'm sure we'll do that.
Yeah, to talk about like that current in particular, talk about like how they actually consider their gender, because I'm not trans, and I don't. Neither of you guys are trans.
Yeah.
So I feel like they'd have a lot more insight into how it works.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And me personally, I don't read that much queer theory, but I know that's fucking not how it works.
Exactly.
I know that's not how gender dysphoria works, and I know that nobody. Like my partner has gender dysphoria, and they talk to me a lot of the time about how that affects how they think.
Yeah.
And it's not a situation where they're like, "Oh, look, I've got breasts," but in actuality, I don't have breasts.
Yeah.
That's not the thought. That's not the thought.
Exactly.
That's not what gender dysphoria is.
Exactly.
That's not the claims that trans people are making, but this I feel like just with, like they're using ableism as a proxy for saying gender.
Exactly.
And it's God again, and it's just I feel like it's a tendency for the speaker just to speak through anecdotes and speak through implicit ideas. They ask lots of rhetorical questions. They don't like to state their opinion explicitly, and I think that might be because they know if they explicitly said their opinion, people wouldn't engage their thoughts.
Exactly.
Which
Yeah, I mean,
perhaps is also why people call them fascists, because it's a fascist tactic. It's
Exactly.
it's not explicitly, so like, if you're an anti-Semite, not to explicitly, like, I hate Jewish people.
Exactly.
I don't like bankers. Who are most bankers? Rhetorical question.
Exactly.
That's called the Mott and
They're
Bailey,
using
right?
this,
Yeah.
they're using the same type of tactics in their
Yeah.
argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Mott and Bailey, where you have like the Mott, which is like the easily attacked land, and then you have the Bailey, which is like the heavily fortified position. And then when you get attacked on the Mott, you can defend to the Bailey. And it's like how that presents an argumentation is you present something that seems agreeable and everyone can agree with it, but then you use that as justification for a much more racist position that you're secretly holding, but you can get everyone to agree with this sort of soft, light version of it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like that also is just like most upset is their refusal to speak explicitly about gender.
Exactly.
And thinking about it now, I think it's because they explicitly said things like that. If they explicitly like changed that into saying there's a movement called trans, like there's a trans movement, and there exist people who say I've got X, but in actuality I have Y.
Yeah.
They know that people would have an issue with that, and so they're not saying that.
Yeah.
Because they've seen how people respond to that.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not.
It's just it's a dishonest way to talk about the issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, they even double down on it here by saying there are people who are petitioning for the right to have an arm or leg cut off, to have an operation which will make their physical form conform to how they feel, my inner essence.
This is absolutely about transgender people. Why the fuck else would they say that?
Yeah, it is.
That's absolutely what they're doing. They're talking about it through. They knew if they said there are people positioning for gender reassignment surgery to make their physical, because again they think the way people feel about their gender is invalid because it's not material reality.
Exactly.
And where they say like my inner essence, they're trying to discredit it by talking about it as if it's just a vacuous, metaphysical, vague thing that people don't have a good concept. But in actuality, people, I feel like for the most part,
there is a concept.
Gender.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not vacuous like how they're presenting.
Exactly.
God.
This next paragraph is a mega yikes. It's the ultimate idealism, isn't it? Idealism is the philosophical sense that the material world doesn't exist, it's whatever I think is the most important. So actually by that rationale, ideas are prime and matter will have to conform with my ideas. And the ultimate result is this kind of solipsism where you're alone in the world, the lone conscious force, and the ultimate determiner of your own reality without reference to other people or the material reality of the world's environment around you.
If that's the case, like understanding that what they're arguing, this is just a proxy argument for arguing about trans people, then what does it mean when like people who actually like understand the concept of gender argue that it's a social construct? How is that without reference to other people or the material reality of the world's environment around you?
It is
literally the word social construct.
Yeah, they don't think that people who have those feelings have actually considered material reality, but in actuality, these
comes from the material reality.
Yeah, gender
dysphoria
comes from the material reality of the external world telling you something.
Exactly.
Does not like that's what dysphoria is.
Exactly.
Is when what is externally being told to you or what you're shown does not coincide with what you feel internally.
Exactly. And
so, like, they understand that. That's where the negative emotions come from.
Exactly.
And articulate that better. But just from what my partner told me, that is where the discomfort comes from.
Exactly.
From an understanding of the world externally to you.
Exactly.
If it was completely internal, it wouldn't be an issue.
It wouldn't be a problem.
Yes.
Exactly.
If it was completely internal, it would just be fine. They wouldn't have any issues regarding gender or regarding the wider society. If what they were saying was actually how it worked.
Exactly.
If it really was just a radical solipsist, anti-realist, whatever I think is real, then it wouldn't be an issue to these people.
Oh man.
I hate it. I hate that argument.
Exactly.
Like you said, that one's like God.
Yeah, they're literally inverting it. Like to believe that it's idealism, you'd have to believe that these things aren't real in a material basis. And that all of these people all around the world are literally having the same thought and trying to graft that thought onto the material world. Like that's an absurd position.
Oof.
It's a hell of a
It's
a hell of a hard line.
Yeah. It's a pretty cursed article.
Morally, it means whatever you want subjectively is right and correct, so it can be used to justify doing anything, committing any crime against anyone.
God.
Okay, so now we've completely extrapolated this incorrect position to be applied to all of society to justify crime against anyone at any time doing anything.
My God.
It is a type of slope. Yeah, it's a type of slope argument where like a conservative or reactionary would be like,
yeah,
but if we allow gay people, won't that mean that
people
pedophiles? People will think pedophilia is okay.
bestiality will be okay.
Yeah, people think
because we allow gay people.
Yeah,
it's
this type of argument where you feel like it's going to ball up and become something where I can justify anything.
Exactly.
Because it comes from a place where they think it's from an anti-realist idealism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When that's.
Oh man.
Yeah, they're literally just taking the idea that these things come from the person themselves as an idea, and they're trying to graft that onto the material reality. And then they've just extracted that my own subjective morality is all that exists, so I'm just going to do whatever I want and project that onto the material world without consequence. Like,
when that's not.
Yeah, that isn't how that works.
If that were actually how most trans people saw, like, gender, there wouldn't be a movement for trans liberation.
Exactly.
Because out in the world, like, imposing their idealistic view.
Exactly.
And it wouldn't be an issue for them. They could do that within their own philosophy. But in actuality, this isn't how it works.
Exactly.
I don't... Again, like, I feel like it just has... Because I don't know how somebody could think that unless they were malicious towards trans people.
Yeah. And they are.
Towards... Not even trans people, just... Even just what we talk about IDPOL generally, just towards marginalized groups,
exactly,
which aren't willing to give up their own struggles for what they perceive as the good of the entire class.
Yeah, what this is an attempt at a reductio ad absurdum argument, right? They're taking what they think is the sort of moral position of these people, and then saying, if we take that to its logical extent, that means that we can now just commit any crime against anyone. I mean, if that were really true, like, do you honestly think the world would look the way it looks today? Like, wouldn't you have, like, transsexual people committing crimes all over the world currently? Like, wouldn't most of them be in prison or something by now?
Exactly. If this was the actual perspective that LGBTQ plus, like, gender fluid people... anybody who had any sort of what they perceive as a disconnect from reality, and a rejection of reality,
they would just
be doing shit.
Yeah.
Everybody would just be doing whatever. Yeah. Everybody would just be doing whatever. The reason why it's an issue is because the external exists and because the external imposes something upon them.
Yeah,
it's because of material conditions, not not because they ignore and exclude any external information.
Yeah.
Yikes. As a philosophy, they say that it is totally isolating and totally gets rid of the idea, as the previous speaker was saying, of having things in common. What? So gender fluid people don't have anything in common with each other? I don't get it.
What?
Uniting on a class basis around the real things that oppress us, real material and economic phenomena.
Just to harken back what you said earlier, what they're saying in private, what they're trying to say ultimately is that is their perspective on queer issues is that queer people are atomized individuals who are trying to be divisive and disconnect themselves from class, and so because they're doing that, they are hurting the class struggle, and so they're the enemies of struggle because they're divisive and fight against us uniting. They perceive class as a monolith and very incorrect.
Yeah,
like I think class is monolithic. No thing, at least like Marxist classes, like it's a binary, but it's a binary which can be applied to every single actor within a capitalist economy. Either you are bourgeois or you are proletariat.
Exactly.
And they're thinking of they think that queer people identify the same way with like either I am for proletariat, either I am for class analysis and for the liberation of the proletariat, or I am for queer analysis and liberation of queer people.
Which is just not how it is.
Yes.
Especially in the realm of queer theory itself, which is always been communist.
This is always been...
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets bleak. It's tough out
it
there. It
definitely gets worse here. Yeah, capital is the labour of past generations. Sure, I think Marx said that, right? Labour, what did he say? Capital is dead labour or something, right?
Yeah.
Capital is the labour of past generations, accumulating in the hands of a tiny number of people who use their vast wealth to oppress and enslave us. We are wage slaves, we're slaves. You go and tell working people outside this Congress that they're wage slaves and they won't agree with you. They'll think you're mad. I'm not a slave. Slavery, that's all gone. That was the black people in the United States. They literally have no concept of real history and culture, and that's a deliberate product of capitalist education. So what they're going to do now is equate this gender fluidity to this sort of capitalist education. We in the CPGB-ML are here to create a scientific analysis, but let's move away from the fact that this is pure idealism. Why would the capitalist class suddenly take this idea from a group of academics, so they think it originated with a group of academics, not real people in the real world, and propagate it everywhere to the point where it's on the lips of every prime minister, it's on the lips of every banker, and the lips of every capitalist.
Well, that's not true, but...
yeah, I mean, do they think every banker and every capitalist is, like, promoting, like, is in solidarity with the LGBT movement? Like, I don't really think that's...
This is why I fucking hate questions and implicit point-making.
Yeah.
Because I don't fucking know what you mean. I don't know what you mean. Why would the capitalists of academics and propagate it until it's on everybody's lips? Why would they? Why do you think that?
Exactly.
Because what you said earlier makes me think I don't fucking know.
Exactly.
I don't know what to think of what you would extrapolate from that. Because you've extrapolated nonsense.
Exactly.
Really toxic nonsense. I have no idea what your point is. I can only guess at it, and what I'm guessing at is that your point is, I don't know, let's actually analyze that question as if you're the speaker. Why would they?
Well, because I think it comes back to this market thing, right? Like, they think that it's profitable.
They think
that all these capitalist bankers can make money off of this. Like, it's a market that they can propagate, they can advertise to with this ideology from the academics, and then sell products to with the help of these capitalists.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
They just have a very twisted about how LGBTQ plus struggle exists.
Yeah.
And how queer analysis. They just have a very
it's very strange.
Yes, it's I would call it just very, very odd.
Yeah.
And I would really like I don't know if they transcribe all their things, but maybe not right now, but at some point I would really like to see what were the arguments about Motion 8 that brought them to these type of conclusions.
Yeah. Me and Marty were talking about this earlier, weren't we? Oh, not earlier. I think it was like a couple of days ago.
The internal party discourse.
Yeah, I was saying that I would love to have had the whole 8th Congress on video. Like, I want to see this argument and the people there and how it was received, and I want to see like the atmosphere around this speech being given. Like,
exactly.
Sometimes the billionaires let slip things that the mainstream politicians feel unable to say. Now, there was quite a nice article, probably about the time the 2008 banking and world economic crisis hit, when Obama had to say to Wall Street, I'm the thing that stands between you and the pitchforks. But the billionaires were not to worry. Obama told them, we're going to bail you out and we're going to protect you. Some of these billionaires have said that they don't understand why the working class movement hasn't got more traction than it has. They literally don't understand why they're getting away with it. There are incredibly just 8 multi-billionaires who have as much wealth in the hands as fully one half of humanity's population, 3.5 billion people. Billions of people don't have enough food, clothing, housing, shelter, and other apparently uncontroversial motions that we've discussed today very convincingly paint that picture. So there's a real question on how we can take art and culture, ideology and politics, and divide working people to make them feel disunited. If you make people concentrate on their differences, if everyone is totally isolated and different, if everyone is suspicious of their neighbour, then racism has a certain part to play. So here they're literally trying to say that racism plays some part in this LGBT gender fluidity, whatever, right? They're saying it's tangential. They're saying that anything that is divisive, and they say that this gender fluidity thing is divisive, then racism certainly has a part to play in that.
Yeah, then.
Oh my god.
I think Marte just read ahead 2 paragraphs.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. It gets bad.
It's like holes in my eyes.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. It's very useful not to trust Muslims, or not to trust Pakistanis, or not to trust Afro-Americans, or I don't really like that Nigerian who lives next door to me. They're a bit different, aren't they? Well, if people rub along with each other, they get over that, don't they? Apparently not in your party. What do you mean? What are you talking about? You're literally dividing people among these lines.
Exactly. Oh my god.
So much so that they will expel you from the party. In my opinion, despite the active promotion of anti-immigrant hostility, this country has far less racism than whilst I was growing up. Yet the capitalists are constantly searching for new ways of dividing people. So that's how they see this.
Thanks for your opinion on that, Whitey. Oh my god, there's so many things wrong with this.
These 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, 2 or 3 paragraphs. Like,
and yeah,
okay.
you got yourself into a conversation with 2 black men.
Yeah.
Politics of African American liberation, and so it's so fucking wild. It's so wild.
There are like other clear ideological issues that exist with CPGB-ML that don't have to do with the LGBTQ issue specifically, that are present in these 2 paragraphs that like are worth criticizing. I don't want to go too much on a tangent on it, but I feel like it's worth bringing it up.
Sure.
This idea that racism is like a conspiracy theory. This is a problem. I've been telling everyone about this recently. I just read a really good book called Eurocentrism and the Communist Movement by Robert Biel, which was actually written in the context of the British communist movement, the British Maoist movement to be specific, and they were criticizing a lot of positions that are Eurocentric that existed within British communism and Western communism as a whole. One of them is this idea that like racism is a conspiracy, that like some like 3 capitalists in some smoke and mirrors room came up with this idea of like convincing different groups of people to dislike each other, and when really what needs to happen is people need to recognize that that's just division, that's just a lie from the capitalists, and actually the racists need to get over that and just like focus on class. That's a reactionary argument because it ignores the fact that the difference between races and the essence of racism is really the difference in material position of or the social position of these different groups of people in the capitalist world system or within a specific capitalist country in general. And this difference in material conditions exists because of like colonialism or slavery or even like imperialism and like the mass immigration that results because of the differences between the level of exploitation of workers in the global south and workers in the imperial core. There's a lot of reasons why there's a basis for racism that's so much more broad than just like a conspiracy that like
some capitalist thought of it one day. And just to I'm going to talk about a Malcolm X quote and how it applies to what she said in the second paragraph. But I just want to really quickly say like why I think she said this.
Yeah,
is because she views racism as the old issue, and she thinks that we as a society
have gotten past this.
Conquered the issue of racism,
man.
and that now racism, as a party, we need to move on and conquer the issue of LGBTQ plus people. That is so
also just a completely cursed.
Yeah, let me. Malcolm X, in one of his speeches about, I believe in this speech in particular, he was talking about white liberalism in America and like milquetoast responses to fixing the issue of racism, or people who said like, "Oh, it's not as racist as it was." And I mean, specifically, what she says is, in my opinion, despite the active, in my opinion, despite the active promotion of immigrant hostility, this country is far less racist than it was whilst I was growing up. Malcolm X once said, "If you stick a knife 9 inches into my back and pull it out, that is not progress. Even if you pull it all the way out, that is not progress. Progress is healing the wound, and America hasn't even begun to pull out the knife." I think, to use that knife analogy, what she's saying is we pulled the knife out a few inches,
and that just
let's stop talking about the knife.
Exactly.
And then she's saying, well, and even if that's not, even if she's the one where like, we pulled the knife out, she's saying that the new knife to pull out is LGBTQ plus issues, and she thinks that these things are just a series of false issues, which the capitalist class is inventing and giving to the proletariat, so they don't think about their class issues. When if you actually look at the history of how these things become issues, that's not a dialectical way to think about it.
Now, another thing that I wanted to kind of address with this is the whole, and I just feel like this is as good of a time as any. I mean, I'm sure like later in the article they're going to touch on this again, because this is the leading argument for reactionaries in the communist movement against the liberation or the active pursuit of the liberation of, and that's the argument that these movements, like for example, like in this case, it is the trans movement, are divisive. Kollontai, I don't know if Justin, you know who she is. I think Alexandra Kollontai. Do you know who she is?
Yeah, I've heard the name.
Yeah. She's she was a Bolshevik, who kind of pioneered a lot of the theory. Like she kind of formed the basis for a lot of like Marxist feminist theory. She was kind of one of the huge defenders of women's rights in the Russian communist movement. And she basically had this to say about divisiveness when it comes to the women's movement. And I think this is definitely applicable to the trans movement. And the quote is, in the final analysis, the general class workers movement stands to gain from such a division, which is the, i.e. separate agitation among women workers, since the greater concern for the interests and needs of women increases the popularity of the party among women workers and encourages women to join in general party organization. In this way, the special party machine, working for the female half of the working class, is not only does not damage the unity of the movement, but on the contrary, increases the numbers, strength, and significance of the Workers' Party, extending by this means the framework of its social creative work, even as regards solving the complicated and confused women's question. So this kind of goes with the idea that what Justin was saying, that no, like, these like identity movements, trans movement being the one, you know,
they try to do
that they're really mad about in this article. No, they're not like a roadblock. Like the inclusion of these marginalized groups, the active pursuit of the Communist Party of the liberation of these marginalized groups can only serve to increase the popularity of the party among these groups and bolster the ranks of the party. And the only way that the issues of these groups can really be addressed is by some degree of division, like in a way that like constructive division, like division that doesn't harm unity.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like allowing these people to articulate their own interests and fight for their own objective material interests is the only way that they can actually achieve liberation.
Yeah.
They can do that from within the Communist Party, which is what Kollective was saying.
Like a female who's concerned with women's liberation isn't going to engage women's liberation unless the party talks about it. Or they're not going to engage class liberation until the party engages women's liberation. A black person isn't going to want to engage class liberation unless the party is engaging with black liberation. A trans person doesn't want to engage with class liberation if the party's not going to talk about trans liberation. Right? You can't expect a marginalized group to just be like, well, I'm going to forget my marginalization just because the party says that, oh, well, it's bad that they oppress you.
Exactly.
Like because that's just not you're not going to encourage those people. Yeah. It causes disunity because those people aren't going to engage. The only people who are going to engage the party is somebody who's not marginalized at all under capitalism.
Exactly.
And so it's going to be one type of person, one type of worker is going to engage the party if you don't talk about those issues at all.
Exactly.
And again, I don't think if they wanted to be a party where all they deal with is class issues, just like in the example of like the Black Panther, where they were like, we don't want to. Lots of the older members were like, we don't really want to talk about LGBTQ plus stuff or women's liberation.
Yeah,
I think that might be unfortunate, but that's fine if that's all you say. But the biggest issue is that they're not doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
their position is like far more reactionary.
Their position is far worse.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Why couldn't they just say we don't want to talk?
I don't know.
As a party, we're not opposed.
They actually
they're actively opposed. Yeah. They can't do that because they are actively opposed to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they certainly do position it that way, like that. This is an enemy of ours, right? They go on here to talk about bourgeois feminism. Not enough working women are involved in our movement. Why is it that all of our YouTube videos have 80 to 90% hits from men? Young women don't think politics has got enough to say to them. They've been pushed into this blind dead end of bourgeois feminism. As a previous speaker very informally related, what began as a liberating movement for women became a simple demand for a meaningless piece of legislation. Complaints about pay for professionals and wealthy women, working class women were left to go back to the kitchen and raise their families. Actually, say the bourgeois feminists, equality with men is actually about women being sexually promiscuous, to the point where Hugh Hefner type playboy promiscuity, not conforming to this marriage thing, just go for it girl, make yourself naked and get into a pornographic magazine. This is touted as liberation. Women are already liberated in the 60s and 70s, runs the narrative, well done women, all your problems are over, be in pornographic magazines, all your problems are over. I'll just do the whole thing, actually. Working women, while not fully buying into all of this, however, have successfully been encouraged not to identify with mainstream working class movements. It's very hard. We're lucky to have a few strong women comrades, but look at the composition of the room. Where are our active young working class women? Why aren't they here? We've been divided from them through a narrative that says sex is the most important thing. Men are oppressing me. Why would I unite with a man to try and solve my problem? My problem is men, and I don't want anything to do with you.
So there's like an obvious contradiction. Like you can tell, like the basis of this position, like the reason why this position is being expressed by this party is clearly because what they themselves have said. There's not enough working women involved in their.
Yeah.
This is the reason why they've taken an anti-feminist position.
Because there's not enough women. Why aren't there enough women in our party? Because one of your speakers during the party says very authoritatively when the party got called trans-exclusionary reactionary feminist, I'm not a feminist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I do not involve myself with
exactly.
The reason why women are involving themselves with, the reason why like people are attracted to liberal, like for example feminism, just use this because I think all I did.
Yeah.
The reason why a woman might be interested in pursuing a liberal feminism over this type of non-response is because at least the liberal feminists, who might not actually solve the core issue, is capitalism. And I agree with the reason why women are discriminated against in Western culture and lots of cultures around the world is because of the material conditions created by capitalism or other systems. But when your response to that is a non-response and to say, I'm not a feminist, I don't deal in liberation of women, somebody would rather talk to somebody who does deal with it.
Exactly. Like, I mean, literally, they present the idea that, like, in the final paragraph of, like, women thinking men are oppressing me.
Why would I reunite with a man to try and solve my problem? That's a completely logical...
Exactly. They present that idea as, like, a...
Yeah.
So it's just like...
I had this discussion the other day on Discord, because someone was talking about, like, they were like, how come it's not okay for a white guy to say he hates black people, but if a black guy says he doesn't like white people, that's fine. And I'm like, all right, well, if black people are organizing, and this is also my issue with, like, black liberation organizations that have non-black heads. If it does, and Malcolm X talks about this, you don't try to get your freedom from the people who are oppressing you.
Exactly.
That doesn't make sense. Exactly. The reason why women aren't joining your party is because you're not creating a space in which women want to join your party.
You're not allowed.
Because you're not putting women in leadership.
Exactly.
And because you don't want to talk about feminism.
Exactly.
That's why women aren't in your party, dude.
And the reason why you have those positions in the first place is because women are not in your party.
Yes.
It's actually like a self-perpetuating... Like,
it's a self-perpetuating... Because they have opinions that don't make women, like, excited for that party or want to involve themselves in that party. It creates a situation where women are like, well, why would I join?
Exactly.
It's a bunch of guys who don't give a shit about my liberation. I don't want to involve myself with them.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just reminds me of the IWW in the I think it was like the late 19th century. They were accused of pushing women to the front of their movement, and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn literally said, no, we don't push them to the front, we just don't hold them back, right? And they naturally come to the front. Like, if you create a space where women can actually be the heads, and then they'll naturally move to the front. All you have to do is stop actively oppressing them, right? So the idea that you don't have women in your ranks should be a moment where you look around and be like, all right, so what are we doing here? Because clearly, like,
we're doing something that's making women say, I don't. And again, maybe it's just a fundamental issue with how this party conducts itself. They're not doing enough self-critique. If those were my, if I ran a Marxist party, and I looked, and 90% of my members were men, and 10% of my members were women, I'd be like,
reason.
That would be a good reason. What are we saying that's turning women off of the party?
Exactly, and how can we change?
We change that? What are we? It should be a situation where you say, "Wait, what did we do wrong?"
Exactly.
Not a situation where you double down.
Exactly.
Like you're doing a sentence and say, "Oh, here's an issue." The issue's not us. The issue.
Yeah, it can't be us.
Yeah, it can't be us.
It can't
Other
be
people
us.
must.
There are actually a couple of interesting things in this section, right? Like, there is such a thing as bourgeois feminism, right? Like, if you take the idea of feminism and you strip it of any class consciousness, right? Then it becomes a handmaiden to, like, petty bourgeois liberalism, right?
Exactly.
So there is such a thing as bourgeois feminism, for sure, right? That's like been something that Marxist strains fought against forever. I think there was even a strain of Marxists that fought against the suffragette movement originally because it was literally perpetrated, it came from bourgeois women who said, well, we're bourgeois, like, why don't we have the right to vote, right? Like, it wasn't a working class movement, it wasn't a class movement, it was literally just along the lines of, well, we're women, and why should we bourgeois women have to suffer, right? So there is bourgeois feminism, it's definitely real. But the idea that they talk about here that, like, feminism just wants women to be promiscuous is totally missing the point, right? Like, I always thought that feminism was giving women the right to choose whatever they want to do, right? It's not forcing women to be playboy promiscuous. It's just saying, if that's what you want to do with your life, you can do that. Like, we won't stop you from doing that. It's not forcing them to.
Further still, this is, like, totally ignoring the fact that, like, sex-negative feminism exists.
Sure,
there's, like, actually, like, a whole movement of feminists critiquing that
strain
strain of feminism,
Yeah.
sex positivity. That's not even to like make a comment on like sex positivity versus sex negativity, but it's just like that is like already intellectual, like to just ignore that the existence of that entire part of the feminist movement.
Yeah, that whole paragraph does kind of seem like they're externalizing an internal problem.
Yeah,
It's like they've recognized this problem within their ranks, and like whether they know it or not, like it exhibits itself in that paragraph.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, for sure.
Unity of all workers and oppressed. We must get away from this idea that of wearing a badge of oppression. We are a small group because we've been actively marginalized by ourselves. The huge multi-million strong communist movement across Europe and the Middle East, across much of Asia, Africa, has been broken by I always mess up the pronunciation of this. Khrushchevite, revisionism from within. It's been broken by imperialism, which used every division in the communist movement as an opportunity to drive home the wedge and destroy our ideology. The grip that communist policies naturally had over the working people was based upon its truth and utility as a guide to the liberation struggle of the masses, and we want to rebuild that. We're not going to rebuild it through division and discord, through a struggle against reality. I think the resolution is very good for this reason. We in the CPGB-ML are and always have been actively opposed to discrimination on the grounds of race, sex, and sexual proclivity. We want broad unity of the working class as working people who face the same economic oppression and have the same interest in changing it. See, that super confuses me, because it's like, well, what happens to gender fluid people who are working class? Like,
Exactly.
you say you promote unity, and at the same time you're actively causing divisions in that group.
Or even like, oh well, yeah, that is true. Like that's the thing. Like that's like what Kollective was basically like. Being inclusive, a communist party should be inclusive to marginalized groups because it will just grow the communist party. It would make the politics of the communist party more relevant to more people. It will show more people that the Communist Party is is the way forward for them. Essentially, it will increase the strength of the party overall. So it really is divisive to not include certain groups of people. So it is ridiculous to criticize like just various different marginalized people for the supposed divisiveness of their of the pursuit of their own liberation. That's just completely ridiculous. This position is divisive.
Ooh. Just reading ahead, this paragraphs get painful now. During our relative and absolute oppression, data and truth, the oppression of trans women. During our inter-party debate running up to this Congress, conducted largely in local groups and the party bulletin, some comrades produced articles saying that particular and unusually harsh oppression had come to a group of people, LGBTQ+ people. They attempted to demonstrate this particular oppression of transgender people by producing a variety of references and percentages. First of all, I would urge them to look very carefully at their figures and sources. What's the actual percentage of the working class that are transgender? It's very difficult to figure out. A member of the audience says it's 10% of the population. No, it's very far from that figure. It is statistically so small as to be insignificant. It's absolutely tiny, but if you take everyone who is gay and tell them, actually, really, you're transgender. What? If you take everyone who is confused during puberty, well, everyone's confused during puberty, but actually, probably, you're transgender. If transgender becomes your fashionable label that you impose on everyone who feels alienated in society, then you start to arrive at these incredible figures.
Oh my god. Oh my god. That's just their way of completely and totally just like erasing the figure, just like trying to completely ignoring the actual statistical evidence that was presented to them that this is a large portion of society that they're trying to alienate. That's their argument to to just completely
People must be
ignore that.
confused if they think they're transgender. According to the CPGB-ML. They... Yeah,
biggest... Oh, sorry, go on.
It's just like they're trying to make it to where, at least I assume, the point that they go towards is like, what's the point of appealing to like less than 2% of the population?
Mm-hmm.
That's so...
Yeah, it's really dumb. That's what I was going to say. Like, the most problematic sentence there is, it is statistically so small as to be insignificant. So you're literally saying, because even if this data existed, right, and
even if it were true.
Yeah,
even if they were correct.
Exactly. Assuming they're correct about everything, you're literally saying these people that exist are such a small point of the population that they're just insignificant. I mean, literally, it's statistically so small as to be insignificant. You're literally discounting an entire group of people just because they are a small number on a flowchart or whatever, right? Like, that's ridiculous. On a pie chart, not a flowchart. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're literally invalidating the experiences of an entire group of people just because they are, by definition, the minority, right?
It's this type of argument that some white nationalists use when they talk about minority groups, and they're like, why should the majority have to
cater to the minority? Yeah, they say this all the time.
It's like, even if like it was less than 1% of the population was transgender, that wouldn't invalidate talking about it. It wouldn't be like, why are we queer theory? It's only 2% of the population. It's like, there's still people. There's still people, and there's still an element of the working class.
Exactly.
So they still, if you care about liberating the working class,
you care about working.
Yeah. I mean, it is just like blinders. They've literally said, like, we are for all of the working class except this little bit here.
Except the minority.
Yeah, exactly. Like, except these
exactly.
ones. It's like, what? Oh dear. Alright, let me continue reading. Because, actually, the percentage of people who are alienated in society is massive. Sure. Absolutely bloody massive. Sure. Because alienation is a product of capitalist exploitation. Sure. Of its individualism and its dissatisfying, isolationist, selfish culture. Sure. Equal if you take any group in a society, figures can be quoted to show an association but not causality. Let me give an example. I'm not comparing the two groups, but if I said that fascists are overwhelmingly working class, or fascists are overwhelmingly less likely to get a job, therefore we need to be championing the rights of fascists, it's totally the wrong way of constructing an argument and is meaningless. When we discuss the question of trans rights, we're told that this is exciting and new and meaningful and trumps all other issues, but never forget that to the extent that this is a real group of people and not a manufactured ideological product purveying by the bourgeoisie, to sow confusion and disunity in the ranks of the working class, then we're talking about an insignificant percentage of the working class.
Yeah.
So they literally think that, like, people who are gender fluid are like Frankenstein. Like, it's been created and manufactured. I
hope this party disintegrates.
You were absolutely. They believed in some type of conspiracy which created trans people.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what they believe. They're conspiracy theorists.
They think that it was a conspiracy in order to disrupt their what they perceive as good politics. And I think it's holy.
Oh my god. They don't think that. They just don't think that there's any discrimination. Trans people. They don't think
they go as far as saying that discrimination doesn't matter because they're an insignificant percentage of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like they take it a step further, which is why where my belief that maybe they just don't know about this falls apart, because I'm like, you've taken it to a point where it's like, even if you are ignorant, you're being malicious. You assume that they're out to do bad things to your movement. And
exactly.
So you're out to do bad things towards them.
Exactly.
Like a logical conclusion of all that they've said is that we should fight trans rights.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because trans rights are against the working class.
Exactly.
That's their conclusion.
Oh, man.
I mean, the claim they go on to make here is just even stranger. Like, when we state clearly that we are against unjust discrimination, that relates to everyone, to all groups of workers. It's covered. That statement and belief covers everyone. We're inclusive?
Oh, man.
It's intense cognitive dissonance where explain how they aren't inclusive. We cover everybody except for this insignificant minority. But actually, we just said we covered everybody, so we're inclusive.
I'm reading the title of the next section, and I can tell that this article is about to get so cursed. This is actually going to make this
it really is.
Oh my god.
This article is already like the One Ring, right?
Yeah.
It's already a high-powered, evil, cursed artifact.
Yes.
That I don't want anything to do with.
Oh my god.
Alright, here we go, guys. We're going to dive head in. Racism, black, and bourgeois nationalism versus proletarian internationalism. It's the same in our attitude towards racism. I've been in Brixton, which is a place in London, and I've had someone walk up to me and say, "Yeah, man, you think it about race or about class?" And when I told my fellow Lambeth resident and worker that fundamentally oppression is based on class, he simply opined, "Nah," and walked away, because the black community also. Why aren't the black community here? They should be. Overwhelmingly, black workers find themselves confined to the lowest sections of the working class because of racism and because of the legacy of colonialism. Black workers should be identifying with the broad highway of working class politics, but no, because we've been kept artificially divided, blacks are told whites are racist, whites are encouraged to be racist, and despite the fact that we've broken that down in many day-to-day dealings in our political organizations and our social organizations, we ghettoize. We ghettoize. Should a Turkish comrade living in Britain identify as a British worker or as a Turk? Is he a Turk first and foremost? That's been a huge problem for the revolutionary movement in the country. I can tell you there are hundreds, thousands of militant communists in London who will agree with me on pretty much everything, but they will not join our organisation because I'm a Turk. Actually, the struggle I identify with, that I feel most strongly about, is going on here in Turkey, and although I live here and my kids are here and they go to school here and I'm working here and I face the problems that are here, and in fact basically I'm a British worker and my kids don't speak Turkish, well, I'm Turkish and I don't want them to get involved with you because I want them to look to Turkey. Should I keep going or do you want to stop there?
This is a thick section. We can up here.
Okay. But. So this party is a revisionist and reactionary Eurocentric party.
Yeah.
That is actually just bad. And I reiterate, I do really hope that they disintegrate. Mm-hmm. All British communists have a duty to combat this party. I genuinely believe that. Between revisionism and Marxism-Leninism. Maoism, parentheses. Yeah. So, to go in on this.
I'll be back. I get something out of my throat.
Okay.
Please.
The first problem here is that, again, they still have this conspiracy theory view of racism. This idea that racism is something that was forced on the white working class by like a few capitalists who came up with this idea one day from a dream and decided that this would be a great way to divide the working class. Mm-hmm. When really they refuse to recognize, because of their Eurocentric prejudice and because of their prejudice as labor aristocrats, their own position as parasites. The reason why black workers, for example, or Turkish workers will identify with the struggle going on in Turkey, or the struggle going on in it's Britain, so it's different than the United States, where I would say it's like a black national liberation struggle. But I guess like the struggle going on in the black community, why they would identify with that struggle more is because of the fact that they understand that the white working class directly benefits from their oppression. That is true. And so that is the problem with having that conspiracy theory view, is it is a revisionist view that totally erases that fact. They understand that colonialism is responsible for the reason why like black workers are position, have a lower social position or class position than white workers. They understand that, but what they don't understand is what Marx understood when he referred to the British proletariat, actually specifically, as being a bourgeois proletariat because of the colonial exploitation of the nations, the oppressed nations in the global South, people of color, etc., etc. Which is the reason why they developed a very, very reactionary politics that was essentially opposed to fighting imperialism and opposed to the liberation of these oppressed nations and peoples. They don't understand that connection. They think that racism is a conspiracy theory. They think that racism is something external to the working class that's forced on them from the bourgeoisie, and that is a lie. That is a lie. It's not. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not in line with the thought of Marx. Not in line with. It is just revisionist. It's not dialectical. It's not materialist. It's so bad, and it honestly makes me pretty furious.
It's a terrible view of how these things work.
Yes, yes, it is.
Is Justin back? Did he want to say something, or will I continue reading?
I mean, did you talk about the Turkish comments? Were you talking
about? We got halfway down.
Yeah, I don't want to rehash what anything you guys said, but just the British workers.
Yeah.
The reason why a Turkish worker who moves to Britain is still going to care about Turkey is because his culture is still Turkish. He still has family in Turkey.
And you know what?
Yeah.
The Turkish working class are actually engaging in armed struggle against their government.
Yeah.
That's not something the British working class is.
So maybe necessarily he's maybe I'm more interested in the armed struggle, but third world and the first world, they for the most part concern themselves with the politics of the third world in terms of praxis.
Yeah.
Because again, there's not things like armed struggle going on here.
Yeah. But even in a British context, there is armed struggle going on in the Isles. With Ireland, there's a national liberation struggle going on there. There is they don't have to view things that way. They don't have to. They just do because of their own biases, and it's really sad.
And they have they have an issue. I mean, they don't understand why a black or a Turkish person might say I don't want to be in your party.
Yeah,
because you're not. And they even acknowledge that the reason why is because they don't engage with issues like anti-immigration policy. They don't engage those things, so they're we've basically. It's like the Malcolm X quote. They feel they've pulled the knife out a little bit.
Yeah,
they feel it's not as bad. But why are we still talking?
Yeah,
and that's just. I feel that's just their perspective on the issues of a nationally focused type of praxis, as opposed to. And I also feel they later on they haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
But if I recall, I feel they build a false binary where you must either pick internationalism or a type of national liberation. When in reality, you won't have international. There's no international revolution without national revolution.
Exactly. Exactly.
They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, they rely on one another to exist.
Yeah.
And the national revolution won't matter if it doesn't provoke another national if it doesn't cause an effect where other national revolutions start.
Exactly.
They aren't mutually exclusive.
Have they read Mao? Have they read Marx?
I was actually going to say Marx actually says that. He says that even though the struggle is international, each country is going to have to contest with their own bourgeois first.
Yeah. Before you can deal with the international issue, you have to deal with
the national issue. You have to deal with your own bourgeois oppressing you directly before you. Yeah.
And you can't expect most workers to ask themselves an international question before they've dealt with national questions.
Exactly.
Because one necessarily pertains to them more than the other does.
Exactly.
One is a direct issue. One is more of an existential issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like an issue between how am I going to pay for dinner tonight and how am I going to pay for rent? It's like the issue between those two things.
Exactly.
And they don't see how or at least they see how one appeals to people more than the other, but they don't understand that.
Yeah.
They don't understand why people are concerned with national issues, not international issues. Why people are concerned with specific types of liberation as opposed to just class liberation.
Yeah. Oh.
Ooh.
It's just no good.
Absolutely. I'll read the second half of this here. Where did we get to? The children of such a revolutionary are almost impossible to draw into revolutionary politics on this basis. They don't really engage with Turkey in that way because they're British. They were born here. You adopt the culture of your friends and the culture that surrounds you when you grow up. For kids that grow up in Britain, they are culturally British, and to deny their Britishness and their right to change British culture and to join the British working class movement and change what is wrong in their lives means they have become alienated from all that is living in both cultures. You can chime in if you want, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say again, they view it as they think that if a Turkish person moves to Britain, and they're like, I'd rather be in a party that has Turkish people who deal with this. They think that means that they're not going to... It's impossible for that person to involve themselves with a general British working class because they're dealing with their own community.
Yes.
And it's really fucked. It's really fucked.
It's like, if they concern themselves with the struggle in Turkey, apparently, in the view of the CPGB-ML, that means that they don't support the idea of international proletarian revolution.
Mm-hmm.
That means they don't support the idea of global communism, right? According to the CPGB-ML. Like, how is supporting the national liberation of your country, or supporting or being concerned about the struggle in your country primarily, how is that mutually exclusive with supporting the idea of proletarian international proletarian revolution?
And I'm concerned with how they end this, because if they end it like how they ended their discussion about gender issues, like if Motion 9 is about how dealing with if you care about national liberation that's not British liberation, you're out the party, kid.
Oh my god!
If you're a Turkish person and you care about what's going on in Turkey instead of about what's going on in Britain or on a global scale, get out the party.
What is their position?
What do they think?
Oh no!
We might have to do some more episodes on like other things this party believes, like other articles they've written.
Oh no!
Becomes a
just
deep dive into what went wrong.
Exactly.
I mean, again, that gives me it gives me ideas. You guys should make videos about them. I might make a video about them.
Yeah, we should, for sure. Or at least like follow this party over the next year or something and see what happens to it. Like,
see if they take questions on Twitter or something.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Should, like,
is that just again like I see their logic, and it's bad logic, but I just wonder how does somebody who is a Marxist and who understands parts of Marxist theory reach these conclusions?
God.
Yeah, it is a really strange thing.
Keep asking myself that. Yeah, keep going though.
I'll keep reading it. Are we going to carry on in that way? Are we where we are separate?
we're at the question. Are we going to?
Yeah. Are we going to carry on in that way, where we are all separate and all divided? Do we have to follow the fashion of the bourgeoisie? The bourgeois that have pushed this identity movement aggressively had done so to confuse the isolated working class youth. So I will conclude by saying we're not transphobic. There's nothing to be afraid of in this statement. We do not advocate discrimination against any group of the working class. We advocate unity, we advocate common struggle, we advocate understanding, we advocate a broad and tolerant society, but we do not advocate and we cannot allow the bourgeoisie to impose this divisive ideology upon us. Thank you, comrades.
You know, Maoists in United States, they have a tendency to do this thing where they end up like actually like fighting with like the parties that they consider revisionist parties, and a lot of times it's just like a very destructive practice.
Yeah.
Honestly, and it's not. It's really just like small sects fighting each other, and it's really kind of stupid.
Sure.
But this party, I would recommend genuine communists in Britain to literally fight the CPGB-ML. They're that bad. Like, honestly, it's crazy how this article as a whole, since we're at the end, like, I think that I should kind of give like a
give like a
crazy
an
how this
overview, like a
article,
synopsis.
like, as a whole, like it's reactionary in more ways. Like, it's like
It's an onion.
like, exactly. Yeah, it is. It just gets deeper. It has layers,
And you cry the whole time.
Yes, exactly.
Peel back each layer.
Yeah, it just gets worse and worse as time goes on, and the positions, there's just more and more reactionary positions. They're anti-trans. First of all, the article, upon initial inspection, it seems like it's just against gender fluid people.
They don't really talk about gender
But
fluid
really, it's not.
I don't think they mention gender fluid.
They don't mention.
at all.
But, I mean, by being anti-trans, they're
You are
anti-gender fluid
yeah.
people. So they're anti-gender fluid people. They're anti-trans, but they're also anti-feminist. And they don't support national liberation. Like, they have a Eurocentric revisionist position on like national oppression as well. It's just, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. So I mean, like, generally people should like oppose infighting between parties that generally agree on most things, right? But that's not what this is, right? Like, this party isn't in line with like all other parties around them, or even
Exactly.
in line with,
It really isn't.
No.
It really isn't.
No, it's not. It's not like a disagreement about how socialism should manifest or like what socialism means after the fall.
Yeah. This is
Or it's not a disagreement about praxis is most
this is a
effective.
conflict between conservatism and socialism. Like, their position is just a conservative position.
Yeah.
It's the same position that, like, what's the conservative party in it's Tories.
The Tories.
It's like there's positions in here that like the.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. It's like, I don't believe horseshoe theory's real, but it's literally almost like this party has become. You know what I mean? It's like they've tried to be so left-wing, they became right-wing. It's like, how did you do this?
This party is the reason people horseshoe.
Yes.
It's because they say this. And they're like, this sounds a lot like far right.
Oh my god.
This is why people call you again.
Yeah.
This is why people call you fascist.
This is why. This is
why that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like social chauvinism, right? Like, it's this whole...
Yeah.
Oh.
And again, lots of it is not. It's not like they're making a conscious effort to do it. It's just like subconscious. It's like subconscious, implicit.
Does that make it worse though? Because it's like they really believe these things. It's like,
yes, they believe it on a level that is not even conscious.
yeah,
They believe it on a level where it is embedded into the way they think about everything.
yeah. I mean, you can see that just in like the assumptions, like the things that they've baked in as fact, which are actually not at all.
Yeah.
Like
that sex and gender are the same thing.
Yeah, like they're synonyms, and it's like, what? No one would.
Marxists have known this
Yeah.
since at least the 70s.
Yeah. And probably.
And they also apparently appear to think that like all feminism is bourgeois feminism. Like,
Yes. Yeah. They conflate
yeah,
all types of with
but, like,
each other.
that's the only version of feminism exists.
Yes.
It's really strange.
Oh my god.
Do you want to do the EDL article also, or do you want to call it after this?
How long is it so far?
What the episode so far? We're like 2 hours 48.
2 hours 48. That's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can call it after this if you want.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and say the other article for another time.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. We'll do that then. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys, for people that stuck with us through this. I don't want to actively promote going on hating on this party, but I don't want to say not to either. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I honestly am just going to go ahead and say I actively promote hating on this party.
yeah, no, that does make sense because
unless it changes, which is always possible.
Yeah, and it can also be constructive,
actively
right?
promote
Like,
hating on this party. This is a reactionary party.
no, you're right. Yeah, it definitely is. Like, yeah.
I mean, like, as a Maoist, I believe that it's important to struggle against revisionism and to recognize that revisionism is not genuine. And when people have positions that, like, when parties have positions that are just right wing and anti-Marxist and just conservative like this, we should oppose those parties.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, that's just my.
Yeah, sectarianism's not inherently bad, right? There are genuinely, like, sects of communist thought that come up that genuinely shouldn't ever obtain power. And,
exactly.
This would be one of them, right? Like,
this
it's
is
not,
one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just, infighting for the sake of infighting. It's like these ideas.
CPGB-ML rose to power in the United Kingdom. Imagine that utopia.
It would be 1984.
Yes.
My God. Just so you guys know, like, getting you got 19 other options if you want to join the Please. I would look into them first before humoring this party.
There are definitely better options out there for sure.
Oh yeah.
The thing is, because we have a parliamentary system, like, if this party ever came to power, they would actually, like, be happy to form a coalition government with, like, conservative parties, right? Like, because they, like, socially, they'd be. It seems like they could form
almost total agreement. Yeah.
They'd kind of form an alliance on that issue. Like, it would literally seem like they wouldn't be opposed to sharing power on those core issues. Like,
yeah.
That's really strange.
Oh my God.
All right, guys. Absolutely, it's bad. I think this concludes this episode, guys. So, if you've enjoyed, like, comment, all those things, and help the movement, spread the message, and we will see you in the next episode, guys. All right, peace.